Chapter 847. Rumble, rolling thunder resounded through the sky, playing the song of the dead for the battlefield that was full of corpses. The black clouds in the sky were like Mount Tai, heavily pressing on the hearts of all the survivors in this battle of life and death. The battle was won. But the battlefield that was full of devastation and full of corpses told everyone a fact. Today's Aubrey could no longer withstand another battle. All of Aubrey's lines of defense, including the final direction, had collapsed. Even with the help of the sudden appearance of the unfamiliar battleship, the collapse of the final line of defense was an established fact. In this case, any experienced frontline commander would give the order to regroup and repair the final line of defense as much as possible. However, under the black clouds, surrounded by the two unfamiliar airframes, the girl who was regarded as the highest leader of Aubrey could not give this order for a long time. Because her eyes were always on the wreckage that was almost broken copper and iron. That was Aubrey's Murasame. It was also the Guardian's vehicle that had accompanied the girl through many difficulties. In the broken cockpit, the figure was still tall and sturdy. But it was already dripping with blood, and there was not a good place to be found on the body. The pilot uniform that was supposed to provide protection for the body was even more broken, and large pieces of rotten flesh stung the girl's eyes. However, what the girl couldn't accept the most was that the figure that was torn into pieces by the scars had a trace of a smile at the corner of his mouth. A trace of a smile that completed his long-cherished wish and had no regrets. Chisaka, the girl's voice was trembling. Sadness, like a tide, rushed to the girl. However, as the highest leader of Aubrey, at this moment, she became a dam that resisted this tide of sadness, constantly bearing the impact of that sadness. Her increasingly hazy eyes fell on the broken figure, watching the last moment of the Guardian in the world. Suddenly, the girl's eyes trembled. She saw a stain on the ground. A piece of blood-red stain. That was a stain drawn with bright red. At this moment, the dam built by the highest leader of Aubrey collapsed, and could no longer resist the surging tide of sadness. Tears quietly slid down the girl's cheeks, dripping on the charred and broken wreckage, splashing up a little bit of dust. Chisaka! You idiot! The young girl couldn't help but fall to the side of the cockpit, her right hand powerlessly hammering the charred steel plate. Thousands of words rushed to his throat, but he couldn't say a single word, a single sentence. All that was left was the girl's low whimper. Rumble, the lightning in the sky was still galloping above the dark clouds. When the loudest thunderclap tore through the sky, the battlefield that had been ravaged by the flames of war welcomed a torrential rain. A rainstorm to bid farewell to the dead. Pata! The bean-sized raindrops fell on the broken Murasame, splashing smoke and dust. The girl who was crying in a low voice accidentally saw that the raindrops sprinkled on this battlefield were black. The young girl abruptly raised her head, only to see an octagonal light shield emitting a green radiance between her and the black clouds, blocking the black rain that poured down in torrents. It was the two unfamiliar airframes that had suddenly appeared on the battlefield and saved the girl's life. I'm sorry. This black rain was not within our expectations. In the black rain, two figures quietly appeared, stepping on the water mixed with blood and black rain, standing beside the broken Murasame. This Aubrey defense battle was over. The report about this battle was also sorted out by the intelligence personnel on the Son of Dan slave and sent to the throne through the Empire's intelligence network and placed in front of Ray Minkai. Looking at this report, Ray Minkai fell into a long silence. The actions of Beta were not unexpected. Since Ray Minkai came into contact with the worldview of the MUV series, he knew that Beta, a race that was always jokingly called by the audience as cosmic miners, was impossible for humans to reach a settlement. Therefore, Ray Minkai didn't pay much attention to Beta. What he cared about was the information collected by the intelligence personnel of the Son of Dan's slave under the leadership of Teresa from Aubrey. At the top of the list were the many records about Aubrey since the outbreak of the X1 Rift crisis. Among them, there were records about the disappearance of Minerva and the Pillar of Heaven since the outbreak of the X1 Rift crisis. The time span was about 2 years ago, and 1 year and 6 months. It had to be said that this record caught Lei Mingkai's attention and confirmed some of his speculations. In the midst of the buzzing sound, a hazy figure quietly appeared. It was Himimi, whom he had not seen for a long time. What a rare guest! When Lei Mingkai saw that the person who came was Himimi, who claimed to have gone out alone to search for information, he put down the information in his hand and got up to greet her. Of course, this was just a holographic projection from an unknown place. Except for Hinana, no one could know where Himimi was now. Himimi looked around and couldn't help but nod her head. I didn't expect an empire prince like you to know how to enjoy yourself. I heard that not only did you take Minerva into your pocket, but you also took in the remnants of the Pillar of Heaven's army. Lei Mingkai shook his head. He knew that Himimi was just teasing him. As a member of Steel Plum, Lei Mingkai could understand the meaning behind Himimi's words. Moreover, Himimi did not give Lei Mingkai a chance to be humble. That's all for the opening remarks. Now let's talk about my findings. Lei Mingkai raised his eyebrows, turned around, and sat down on the sofa, looking like he was all ears. Nana should have warned you about the current situation of this world. Yes. From the series of events where we discovered the Minerva and the Pillar of Heaven, this world seems to be caught in an indescribable time vortex. Yes. In fact, this vortex is about to reach a threshold. Himimi raised her hand and opened a projection. This is the conclusion I came to after searching for various time anomalies alone. Time anomalies? Are they space-time anomalies? Lei Mingkai pondered for a moment and voiced his doubts. Similar, but not the same. Himimi nodded, and the projection screen in front of her changed several times before stopping at a graph with several peaks marked out. Time anomalies are just abnormal events that are discovered in the great world due to various reasons. As long as it's properly guarded, it won't cause serious problems. Yes, it's like using a pencil to point at a white piece of paper and then being erased by an eraser. And space-time anomalies are destined to be a disaster from the beginning. A disaster that's enough to destroy a world. Lei Mingkai blinked and added a sentence according to Himimi's previous analogy. Like a world-famous painting that was splashed with paint and turned into scrap? Himimi shrugged. That's pretty much it. Then, she pointed at the peak numbers on the graph and said one by one, "This is the space-time fluctuation left behind when the Minerva's distress signal appeared. This is the space-time fluctuation detected by the Throne of Governance when the Pillar of Heaven was discovered," Himimi said as she gestured. The difference between the values of these space-time fluctuations is getting smaller and smaller. As time passes, I'm afraid that in the near future, they will become completely identical. At that time, the world where the Minerva, the Pillar of Heaven was originally in, might be completely merged with this world. We're already prepared for this. Yes. When he learned of the existence of the Minerva, Lei Mingkai had been making all kinds of preparations. No. It's not enough now. Himimi waved her hand. No one can guarantee that this is only a fusion that exists only between two worlds. More than multiple. Lei Mingkai's eyes flashed. The unknown was far more powerful and terrifying than what was on the surface. If it was really as Himimi speculated, Lei Mingkai, no, the Britannia Empire's preparations for this were far from enough. That's true. But based on the current situation, you and Euphemia's preparations should be able to deal with the next development. As for the future, we'll talk about it when the time comes. Himimi clapped her hands, turned off the projection screen, and made a casual stretching motion. I'll leave this to you. I'm leaving in less than 10 hours. Leaving? A new round of intelligence gathering? No. I'm going to Jupiter. Himimi smiled and said casually, "That's right. I got a piece of data from the teacher. It's said to be the song of a Jupiter whale. I'm a little curious, so I want to go to Jupiter to try my luck. After a pause, Himimi continued. I've almost figured out all the space-time anomalies in the Earth's circle. The rest are the space-time anomalies outside the circle. That's also in passing. Then, I'll leave the exploration mission outside the circle to you. Thus, Rei Minkai took advantage of the situation and handed the exploration mission outside the circle to Himimi. Himimi didn't object to this. Himimi probably already had this plan when he came looking for her. Half an hour later, a flower of light quietly bloomed in the depths of the void on the right side of the throne. The moment the flower of light bloomed, a figure appeared in Rei Minkai's mind. If this world was about to complete the fusion with that world, then that old fox would also appear. Gilbert Dylandel. Thinking back to the past, when he first met this old fox, Rei Minkai was the only survivor of Yunu's number 7, and he was the doctor who saved the last compatriot of Yunu's number 7. And now, a pale face of fear, his face was listless. A face of sorrow, a face of extreme anger, these faces kept passing by the spaceport of the colonial satellite of Plant's capital, April City. He brought a human called the Abu refugee to this friendly country that was willing to open its borders and temporarily accept the Abu refugees. However, this friendliness wasn't free. Tens of thousands of refugees could escape from Earth to Plant, but less than 100,000 people could enter the refugee area of Plant's capital, April City, to temporarily live. In order to accept this group of refugees, April City mobilized almost all the forces that could be mobilized and tried their best to guide this group of refugees into the refugee area smoothly. Noisy and boiling voices, strange faces of all kinds, hurried figures, all telling the people of April City one fact. Earth, I'm afraid, has already fallen? Earth, has it already fallen? Mayu. I remember that your hometown is Abu, right? Somewhere on a high platform, a gaze hidden under a hoodie looked down at the Abu refugees who had lost their homes with pity. Beside him, a girl wearing a Zaft red dress with dark brown hair tied into a single ponytail shook her head slightly. No. Based on the information that Zaft has so far, the attack of those bugs seems to have been blocked. Is that so? Yes. Miss Lax Klein. What's more, Zaft is saying that the fleet led by the Holy Lion Knight has completed the mission of clearing out the universe around Plant and is about to return to prepare for a new round of combat missions. When the girl in the red dress mentioned the Holy Lion Knight, the eyes hidden under the hoodie seemed to fluctuate slightly. However, it was only a slight fluctuation. What the owner of this pair of eyes cared about was the increasingly noisy crowd below that was beginning to become a little restless. She knew that now was the time for her. No, it was that name's turn to appear. Yes. Then, it's time for us to appear. Mayu. Yes. Miss Lax Klein. Chapter 848. The black rain had receded, and when the sun once again scattered on the battlefield, the land submerged by the black water quietly lit up with scattered lights. These lights were either shining above the black water, hidden in the shadows of the corpses, or simply falling into the depths of the black water, completely drowning their tracks. Although they were scattered everywhere, the body of these lights was a special warhead launched by the Son of Dan's slave, a crustal vibration detection device. For the Son of Dan's slave's list of weapons, these devices were not one of them. It was just that when it came to beta, these special devices would have a unique enemy detection effect. The expansion of the device has been completed, and the crustal vibration detection network has been established, now accepting the first set of detection data and analyzing it. The Son of Dan's slave began to carry out real-time monitoring of the crustal vibration around Ob step by step. At the same time, the moment the detection network was completed, it was also fed back to the throne in the void through the Empire's intelligence network. Kai, the Son of Dan's slave, has temporarily repelled the Beta army that attacked Ob. Is this the original support plan? Sharon stood next to Ray Minkai and leaned over to watch Ray Minkai process the information. Even further away, Mina, who had finished arranging the remnants of her forces, looked at the strange duo in surprise. If Mina did not know that Sharon next to Ray Minkai was just a holographic projection, she would be even more surprised. After all, Sharon's current image was the most sacred and dignified goddess among the three images. Of course, Ray Minkai, who was focused on the information submitted by the son of Dan's slave, did not notice this. Well, carry out according to the original plan. Beta is just a group of stubborn bugs. After Ray Minkai raised his hand to cancel the projection screen in front of him, he pondered for a moment. Replying to the son of Dan's slave, Teresa did a good job with the arrangements. While the son of Dan's slave's newly modified radiation shield achieved the expected effect, he did not forget to monitor and guard against the underground offensive that Beta might take. But this is just a precaution. After a pause, Ray Minkai looked at Mina. Mina, from your experience, how much combat power do you think Aubrey will have after this battle? The moment Ray Minkai asked this question, Mina's expression turned ugly. Be it Obu or Mina's heavenly ward pillar, both of them appeared to be in a difficult position against the invaders of the Beta. Especially in the face of the overwhelming Beta army, the human soldiers would always be shaken, which would lead to unfavorable factors that would change the entire battle situation. I'm afraid there's only 30% left. As Ob's war god of shadows, Mina naturally knew the composition of Ob's defense forces. However, it was also because of this that Mina knew the predicament Aubrey was facing with the final line of defense on the brink of collapse. Afraid. Ray Minkai felt that Mina's answer was a little off. The moment when the pill slave's son entered the battlefield was very subtle. It just so happened that Aubrey's final line of defense collapsed, and the Beta army launched another fierce attack. The son of the Dan slave, who had a commanding position, was naturally able to grasp the entire situation of the battlefield. 30%. This was probably Mina's last bit of confidence in Aub. Thinking of this, Ray Minkai turned to look at Sharon. Get ready! Yes. After Sharon responded, she disappeared into a stream of light. Looking at the stream of light that gradually dissipated, Mina slowly exhaled. Even though she was surprised, Mina still felt a great deal of pressure from Sharon's strange existence. This was not because Mina was afraid of Sharon's existence, but because she was cautious of the unknown. Kai Chisaka is dead? The man who was like a nanny, wandering around Carrie all day long, is dead? Mina sighed as she told the last thing mentioned in the intelligence. Lei Minkai was silent for a moment and couldn't help but nod. Yes, Chisaka is dead. The taciturn man who had fought to protect Carrie had been sacrificed unexpectedly. According to the original trajectory, Chisaka could be said to be the only veteran left in the Aub Defense Force. After 2 wars, among the top few heavyweights in the Aub Defense Force, other than Kira, Mu, and Margot who were outsiders, Chisaka was probably the only veteran from the Aub Defense Force. But now, in this world where the trajectory of the world had changed, Chisaka was sacrificed. In order to protect Carrie, he sacrificed himself. Carrie, I'm afraid, she's crying right now. Perhaps Mina wanted to laugh at Carrie, but in the end, she shook her head, appearing to be particularly waning. Then, before Ray Minkai could react, Mina got up and continued. For the next operation, the Pillar of Heaven has no extra strength to participate, but I will still participate in the support operation as an individual. Also, is that ship just going to be left in this satellite fortress? Mina was referring to the Minerva. When she came to the throne of governance, due to her friendship with Ray Minkai and Lakis, the Pillar of Heaven led by Mina did not receive the same treatment as the Minerva. Instead, it received better arrangement. The Minerva? Of course. We will need to use its name for our next operation. Compared to the unfamiliar name of the Britannia Empire, The Minerva from Zaft would lower Carrie's and Aub's wariness. After all, on the official level, Aubrey and Zaft had a diplomatic relationship like that of an ally. Then, let me know when it's time to depart. I'll go make some arrangements. After taking a few steps, Mina stopped in her tracks. Kai, do you think we should let him know about this? As you wish. Okay. On the other hand, after the trio of Ray, True Flying Bird, and Luna Maria had followed Ray Minkai into battle many times, the Minerva's treatment had greatly improved. It had already completed the final stage of recovery and resupply. Talia could not help but sigh as she looked at Adam, who happily came to see her with the recovery report in hand. In the beginning, Dilindar had intentionally arranged for Adam, who wasn't outstanding in any aspect and was even ignorant at times, to be his vice-captain so that he could gain complete control of the Minerva. Perhaps he never expected that the Minerva would encounter such a bizarre experience one day, did he? Faced with an unfamiliar force that claimed to be the Britannia Empire, this foolish vice-captain actually naively believed that the other party would repair and resupply the Minerva for free? He was really being sold off, yet he was still happily helping the other party calculate the money. Talia sighed and looked up. Unexpectedly, she saw the confused vice-captain. Adam, you forget it. Just leave the report here. Did that Knight K contact us? Knight Commander? No. Half an hour ago, after the Minerva's last resupply job was completed, there was no news from Knight K. Adam was stunned for a moment before he answered subconsciously. Forget it. You go back first. Talia felt a headache coming on. The Minerva that had been repaired and resupplied was undoubtedly a signal. Next, it would probably be the Minerva's turn to pay the price. After a while, Talia called out to Adam, who had 1 foot out of the office. "Oh right. Ray, where are they?" Adam responded and instinctively turned back to the office. "When I came over just now, I happened to meet True Flying Bird. I heard that they are going to Naku in this stronghold to take a look at that Knight K's body." "Body? Or that Knight K's body?" "Yes. Do you need me to call them back?" Talia opened her mouth, but gave up in the end. Forget it. Let them go. People had to lower their heads when they were under someone else's roof. What's more, when the other party seemed to have the intention of recruiting, Talia really couldn't put on a resolute attitude. Sigh. What a headache. Unfortunately, True Flying Bird didn't know about Talia's headache. Instead, his attention was attracted by the Lancelot King's sword that was parked in the middle of Naku and had many technicians carrying out maintenance work. When the pure white gold-rimmed outer armor was removed, True Flying Bird saw the internal results of the body that was completely different from his, Ray's, and Luna Maria's body. As soon as this thought appeared, True Flying Bird subconsciously shook his head and threw it to the back of his head. "Are you interested in going up and giving it a try?" Suddenly, a voice startled True Flying Bird. "Who is it?" True Flying Bird subconsciously put on a defensive posture, but when he saw the person's face clearly, he froze awkwardly in midair, causing the person to reveal an apologetic smile. "Sorry. I didn't expect to scare you. This is my fault." The eyes under the mask revealed an apologetic brilliance, causing True Flying Bird to wave his hand repeatedly and let out a few silly laughs. "No, I was too fascinated by it. It's not your fault, Knight Chief. Besides, if this were to spread to the instructor, I would be badly reprimanded." "Instructor? I don't know who it is." In the dark, Ray Minkai felt that he seemed to know the instructor that True Flying Bird was talking about. "Our instructor's name is Nigal Amify." Although True Flying Bird was a little surprised why Ray Minkai would be interested in his instructor, he still said the name that Ray Minkai was very familiar with. "Nigal? I didn't expect your instructor to be that guy." This time, it was True Flying Bird's turn to be surprised. It wasn't difficult for him to see from Ray Minkai's words and expression that this man who called himself Knight K and wore a mask and didn't show his real face seemed to know his instructor, and it was the kind of relationship that wasn't shallow. Okay. It's just a matter of the past. After sighing, Ray Minkai didn't continue to talk about Nigal changing his identity and becoming the instructor of the Minerva trio. True Flying Bird, are you interested in going up and taking a look? Of course. For some reason, except for me, no one else can drive the king's sword. You can go to the Sword of Firmament next to it. Sword of Firmament. Under the guidance of Ray Minkai, True Flying Bird found that next to Lancelot's Sword of Firmament, there was a silver-gray airframe that was similar in outline but completely different in details. I heard that the airframe here seems to recognize people. As someone who had followed Ray Minkai to battle, True Flying Bird naturally knew the existence of the ELDNOH reactor. Therefore, he also knew the first characteristic of the ELDNOH reactor. Take it. This is a token. Token? Yes. A token that can allow you to temporarily drive the Sword of Firmament. Chapter 849. The black rain that covered the heavens and the earth and enveloped Ob slowly faded away. The land that was once again blessed by the sun had lost its former prosperity. The coastline of Ob's main island was filled with rotting corpses. Behind the coastline, the once prosperous city that was now in ruins was in a tragic state. The warm sunlight did not bring warmth to the survivors of Ob's defensive battle. Instead, it made them feel even colder. Every second there were severely injured people who died. Every second there were new victims who were found from the rubble. Every second standing on the ground that was cleared temporarily. Standing in front of the tent of the Temporary Rescue Command Center. Carrie's expression was silent. Her gaze fell on the pile of rubble not far away, silently watching the rescue workers who were searching for survivors on the rubble. Behind her, Chisaka's body was already covered with a white cloth, waiting for the next step. Prime Minister, although it's a little unreasonable, you should probably focus on adjusting the defense now. I'm afraid that those bugs will attack again soon. At this time, a somewhat unfamiliar but clear voice sounded. Carrie, who was silently watching the rescue work, suddenly moved, a trace of light appearing in her eyes. Yes, I know. Just now I've already ordered people to prepare. Carrie, whose face gradually regained some color, first nodded, then sighed. But I'm afraid our strength is no longer enough to defend this main island. In the battle not long ago, the 3 lines of defense of Ob's main island had been destroyed in name only. Even the final line of defense that was barely reinvigorated by the intervention of the son of Dan's slave was the same. The Ob Defense Force's combat power had reached the point where it was stretched to the limit. After a pause, Carrie looked at the person who came. It was a young girl wearing a white military uniform with a gorgeous golden pattern. Her name was Teresa Testarossa, a young girl who claimed to be the captain of the son of Dan's slave. Thank you for your help just now. If not for your appearance, the main island would have fallen. And we. When the words came to her mouth, Carrie could not help but recall the last scene of Chisaka. No. You're welcome. We're just following orders. Acting under orders? Carrie pondered for a moment before looking up at the silver-haired girl. Is it convenient for you to tell me where you belong? Teresa smiled and pointed at the sky mysteriously. Someone will personally answer this question for the Prime Minister. Sky. Startled, Carrie instinctively thought of a possibility. Zaft? Plant. In the next second, she immediately rejected this possibility. The existence of the Sons of Dan slaves was not a warship that the various factions that Carrie was familiar with could create. Even Minerva, who had gone missing in the X-1 rift during her first voyage 2 years ago, could not compare to this mysterious warship hovering above the main island of Orb. In that case, where did this silver-haired girl in front of him and this warship called the Child of Pill Slaves come from? Teresa seemed to have noticed Carrie's confusion and shook her head slightly. Prime Minister, now is not the time to be concerned about our identities and origins. You only need to know that we bear no ill will towards Aubrey and you, and that we will stand on Aubrey's side and assist him in overcoming this crisis. That will be enough." Carrie was silent for a moment before nodding. "I understand this point. Then, I will have to trouble you next." As she spoke, Carrie looked to her left and right, and a trace of determination gradually appeared on her face. "The main island can no longer organize an effective defense. Next, we must retreat to the island where Huey is and gather all of our remaining forces." "Will there be reinforcements?" Teresa seemed to be implying something. Carrie subconsciously looked up at the sky and then showed a helpless, bitter smile. "At the beginning, there might be. But now I can't say for sure." Naturally, Teresa noticed Carrie's little actions. She knew that the reinforcements that Carrie mentioned were likely the Zaft mentioned in the information provided by Ray Minkai. However, due to the lack of understanding of the current situation, Ray Minkai did not speculate whether a fleet would be dispatched to support Aubrey when he noted the information about Zaft. Right now, after noticing Carrie's expression and words, Teresa was almost certain that this broken country had no other reinforcements other than the son of Dan's slave. Far above the ninth heaven, a silver shadow shuttled through the asteroid belt around the throne of domination. "So fast!" The young man's exclamation echoed in the silver phantom. The pair of red eyes flashed with 30% nervousness and 70% excitement. "Real flying bird. How do you feel?" In the cockpit wider than Gauda's, a holographic projection lit up. It was a communication from the command center of the throne of domination. The man on the screen was Ray Minkai, who called himself Knight K. "Great!" Just after the silver phantom completed a nearly 90 degrees elevation and passed over a piece of rubble with a diameter of hundreds of meters, Real Flying Bird, who was piloting this brand new body, couldn't help but exclaim. Originally, Real Flying Bird thought that Pulse Gauda's cockpit was already spacious enough. But after boarding this new model called Sword of Firmament, Real Flying Bird found that the Pulse Gauda's cockpit, which she originally thought was spacious, had become much narrower. As far as the eye could see, there was an unobstructed surveillance screen. When she lowered her head, there weren't many operating instruments. Even the joystick that Real Flying Bird was very familiar with was replaced by 2 control balls. Simple instrument. Surveillance images with a wide field of vision. This made Real Flying Bird, who was sitting in the Sword of Firmament, feel a stronger sense of control than when she was piloting Pulse Gauda. "Are you used to the control balls?" Ray Minkai nodded slightly and raised his hand slightly to signal the technician next to him to retrieve the data while asking. This was a new technology that the Britannia Empire had made a breakthrough. And the breakthrough of this new technology was also inseparable from Royd, who had become a heavy gluer. Of course, this was just one of the many new technologies in the Britannia Empire. Well, it's a little unfamiliar, but after getting familiar with it, it feels easier to control than the joystick. It had to be said that Real Flying Bird seemed to be getting more and more used to the convenience brought by the control balls. Maneuvers that originally required the coordination of 4 limbs to perform could now be done by making slight adjustments to the control balls in her hand. Such convenient maneuverability made Real Flying Bird have a strong desire to explore for a moment. It looked like a child who had just gotten a new toy. Ray Minkai, who saw this, didn't say much. Moreover, the more Real Flying Bird loved the Sword of Firmament, the more Ray Minkai was happy to see it. A few hours later, the tired but satisfied Real Flying Bird piloted the Firmament Sword and slowly flew into the throne of governance. When leaving the cockpit of the Sword of Firmament, Real Flying Bird unexpectedly felt a trace of reluctance. It was as if she wanted to continue to drive this new machine called the Sword of Firmament onto the battlefield. Real Flying Bird, who had personally driven the Sword of Firmament back and forth in the asteroid belt, knew very well that although the extreme flight in the asteroid belt was very exciting and carefree, this new machine's final destination was only the battlefield. "Catch, Real Flying Bird." The moment a black shadow flew over, Real Flying Bird instinctively reached out to catch it, only to find that the black shadow was a bottle of water. "Thank you, Sir Knight." Real Flying Bird looked up and saw Ray Minkai standing on the plank road not far away, looking at her with a faint smile. Perhaps he had already seen her expression when she left the cockpit of the Sword of Firmament just now. "You can just call me K. There's no need to add honorifics." Ray Minkai picked up the water bottle in his hand and gestured to Real Flying Bird. "Thank you." Real Flying Bird's figure moved, and with a slight push of his right foot on the edge of the cockpit door, his whole body flew to Ray Minkai's side in the microgravity environment. Then, Real Flying Bird reached out to hold the railing, quickly adjusted his posture, and landed next to Ray Minkai. His movements were extremely smooth. Then, Real Flying Bird reached out to Ray Minkai to take out the temporary driving certificate that Ray Minkai gave him and handed it to Ray Minkai. Seeing this, Ray Minkai reached out to take the token and asked casually, "How does it feel?" "Very good. It feels very powerful." After taking out the water bottle and drinking a mouthful of water, Real Flying Bird's tiredness was slightly better. "It's even better than my pulse gauda." Recalling the driving experience just now, Real Flying Bird's reluctance to part seemed to be a little stronger. "Is that so? However, this child is far from reaching the level where he can go offline. Right now, it's only in the experimental stage." What Real Flying Bird did not expect was that the body that made him feel so satisfied was only in the experimental stage. This made him feel incredulous. "You can't believe it?" Ray Minkai smiled but did not explain anything. Instead, he said something else to divert Real Flying Bird's attention. "We received information that Aubrey was attacked by the group of insects and is in a critical situation. Therefore, the Minerva will go to Aubrey in 36 hours to provide support." Sure enough, Aubrey. This country was undoubtedly a lifeline for Real Flying Bird. Even if the Real Flying Bird in front of him had changed the original trajectory of fate and did not leave a lifetime of regret in Aubrey, he still had an inexplicable feeling for Aubrey. What? Aubrey was attacked? Or was it an attack by Beta? Yes. Streams of light fell. Images recorded by the son of Dan's slave appeared in front of Real Flying Bird's eyes. As the images continued to change, the eyes of the young man who was born in Aubrey, grew up in Aubrey as a child, and was forced to leave Aubrey because of the war in his youth burst out with the brilliance of anger. Chapter 850. The preparations for departure had been completed. Just as Talia expected, the Minerva had been requisitioned by Knight K. "Captain Talia, the Minerva's material reserves and spare parts for MS are all in place. When the time comes, your ship will be our reinforcements and support Aubrey." What Talia did not expect was that the mission in front of her that she could not choose was actually a support mission for Aubrey. Wait, Sharon. Madam Sharon. You're saying that the Minerva's upcoming mission is a support mission for Aubrey? Talia was shocked at first, then immediately more questions emerged in her mind. Sharon had already expected this. In the end, it was all caused by the intelligence control of the Minerva by the Imperial throne. Ever since Sharon used her powerful electronic warfare ability to suppress the central system of the Minerva and control it to enter the Imperial throne, everyone on the Minerva, including Talia, could only know what the Imperial throne wanted them to know. Other than that, they knew nothing. Yes. Not long ago, our Empire discovered Aubrey's location and investigated the battle between Aubrey and the Beta. Although our Empire has sent reinforcements, based on the information we have received so far, I'm afraid that Aubrey will not be able to resist the next invasion of the Beta army. Information about Aubrey came out from Sharon's mouth one by one, and at the same time, videos uploaded by the son of Dan's slave were displayed in front of Talia. At this point, Talia reluctantly let go of the doubts in her heart. "So, you want to borrow the name of the Minerva, No, I should say the name of Zaft, to intervene in the war between Aubrey and those insects? We don't want to make things too complicated. After all, borrowing the name of Plant and Zaft, who have a traditional friendship with Aubrey, is easier to accept than directly using the name of the Britannia Empire. Talia pondered for a moment, and finally nodded. Fine. This is also the price to repay the various materials you have lent us. Looking at the stubborn Talia, Sharon just smiled faintly and disappeared in front of her. To an artificial intelligence like Sharon, Talia was nothing more than a futile struggle in her hands. As long as Sharon was willing, this new battleship that had gathered the essence of all Zaft's technology would be destroyed in an instant. At the same time, on the deck of the Minerva, a busy crew was completing the last round of spot checks according to the pre-departure schedule. The huge body was slowly placed on the deck of the Minerva's hangar under the transport of the mechanical arms, waiting for the next step of the work team's guidance. The pure white body of the Minerva's crew, who had finished their work and had nothing else to do for the time being, could not help but stop and watch. Among them there was a trio. Isn't that the knight's body? How did it end up here? Could it be? Luna Maria, who was holding a drink in her hand, pointed at Lancelot King's sword. Yes. I heard some rumors. Ray frowned slightly. The Minerva is about to set sail. Is it the return flight? Have you found your way home? Luna Maria immediately asked back. But Ray shook his head. I don't know. But according to the information given to us by this satellite fortress, Plant and even Zaft's patrol fleet can't be contacted. Is that so? Real, what do you think? When Luna Maria bit her lips in annoyance, she found that Real Flying Bird next to her seemed to be a little strange. As a matter of fact, under Luna Maria's repeated calls, the Real Flying Bird responded in hindsight. Luna Maria, what's the matter? Real, what are you thinking about? Luna Maria wrinkled her nose, looking a little angry. Sorry. I was just thinking about something. Luna Maria did not know. In fact, Real Flying Bird already knew all the contents of the next mission. It was just that the information learned from Ray Minkai made Real Flying Bird's heart a little confused. Aubrey. This was Real Flying Bird's motherland. If it were not for the war many years ago, Real Flying Bird would not be standing here as Zaft's red-clothed elite. But in fact, there were no ifs. The current situation was that Real Flying Bird, standing here as Zaft's red-clothed elite, faced a choice. Hate? Once upon a time, Real Flying Bird hated Aubrey's motherland. However, there wasn't much of this hatred left. Back in the days of Skanska, when she received the mission to go to Plant from the woman who claimed to be a snake, Real Flying Bird knew that the hatred she had for Aubrey was just a young man's anger at being unable to change the current situation. However, understanding was one thing. The youth's heart was still wavering. Real, you know what Minerva's next move is? On the surface, he was Real Flying Bird's good friend, but in secret, he was the youth who was sent by the old fox to secretly influence Real Flying Bird's life trajectory. Reza Beryl noticed Real Flying Bird's strange behavior. The blonde youth knew very well that yesterday, Real Flying Bird went to Naku alone in this satellite fortress without most people knowing. Perhaps, behind this behavior, Real Flying Bird might know the truth of Minerva's upcoming mission. Yes, I know. Real Flying Bird hesitated for a moment, but still chose to reveal part of the information. Minerva, I'm afraid our next mission is to support Aubrey. What? Luna Maria couldn't help but exclaim. But Rem's face became gloomy. In the distance, a pair of figures were watching the movements of the trio. Kai, aren't you afraid of an accident? The pink girl, who was leaning against Ray Minkai, looked at the commotion caused by the trio below. Accident? There won't be any accidents. Ray Minkai shook his head. Among the trio, the only unstable factor was Reza Beryl. However, the foundation of this unstable factor was to establish contact with Plant and that sly old fox, the chairman. Therefore, when Minerva had lost contact with Plant and Zaft, and could not establish contact again for a while, Rem, the youth born with the same genes as Kurlutz, would probably think more rationally before acting. Fully rational actions that took into account the surrounding factors. Ray Minkai had a certain degree of confidence in this point. Minerva's existence ensures their survival, but at the same time, will it become their shackles? The pink girl, Lux Klein, naturally saw Ray Minkai's reliance. Perhaps that's the case. Ray Minkai nodded, then looked at the pink girl beside him. How's the situation on your side? Has Dr. Serene settled down? When Ray Minkai led the trio to support the Pillar of Heaven's defense, Lux was responsible for contacting the DSSD personnel led by Dr. Serene. Although on the surface it was under the guise of communication, in reality, the recruitment operation was carried out without the knowledge of Minerva and Talia. This operation didn't have as many twists and turns as Ray Minkai's operation. With the identity of the Sass family from Scanawea and Dr. Selene's secret help, these DSSD technicians, who were chased by the Beta Army for a while, quickly accepted the suggestion to temporarily stay in the Throne of Command. The shocking scene of the Throne of Command destroying the Zerg's hive, the Cosmic Hive, was witnessed by these DSSD technicians sitting in the first-class audience seat. The shocking lethality caused by the powerful Longsong cannon was still deeply engraved in the minds of these technicians. With the protection of such a powerful weapon in a safe environment, while the technology was advanced, there were also many unfamiliar fields that had never been touched. Under the powerful attraction of unfamiliar technology, the DSSD technicians naturally couldn't escape. They've all been settled in. At that time, Dr. Serene even sighed and said that she could finally sleep in peace. When Lakis thought of the scene where Selene completely relaxed, threw herself on the bed and refused to get up again, she couldn't help but smile. That's good. When Dr. Selene and the others are familiar with each other, give them some projects. In addition, pay attention to the intentions of others and try to keep all the technicians here as much as possible. This sentence was directed at Sharon. Since they had already entered the Throne of Command, Ray Minkai had no reason to watch DSSD, a group of top technicians representing the cutting-edge field of the seed world, leave. In the void, Sharon's goddess image emerged. Understood. Then, I'll release some suitable topics for them to study at the appropriate time. I'm counting on you, Sharon. While speaking, another white body appeared on the deck of Minerva. The appearance of this white body immediately caused the crew on the deck to exclaim, That's a heresy? Aubrey's body? That's right. That was the gold heresy that belonged to Mina. The appearance of the gold heresy Mina naturally caused a commotion. It seems that what Jin said is true. Luna Maria, next, we will fight in a gravity environment. Our body needs to adjust the parameters. Looking at the gold heresy Mina in white, Ray sighed and made a decision. Ah, yes. Luna Maria responded and then exclaimed in surprise. Right. Where's Jin? His pulse Gauda also needs to be adjusted, right? Aha, I'll go too. Lakis, who saw the actions of the trio, closed her eyes slightly. It seems like we haven't seen Carrie for a long time. Aha, it's been a while. Then, let's set sail. Let's go save our friend. Chapter 851. Rumble. Dark clouds once again drifted over from the horizon. Amidst the dark clouds, bolts of lightning constantly shuttled back and forth like dancing snakes. Sometimes they crossed the clouds and gathered the surrounding lightning. Sometimes they penetrated the clouds and struck the ground below. Boom! The lightning that seemed to be as thick as a bucket split the sky. The moment it hit the ground, the terrifying energy that erupted from it blasted a large crater in the ground. At the same time, it also blasted a bloody cloud in the middle of the Beta Army that covered the mountains and plains. Boom! Boom! It was as if the heavens were punishing these terrible monsters from another world. Bolts of lightning constantly broke through the clouds and bombarded the Beta army below with terrifying screams. However, the moment the bloody clouds rose into the sky, they seemed particularly powerless. The number of Beta players was simply too many. From the 2-meter-tall warrior level to the 66-meter-tall fortress-level Gauda, tens of thousands of monsters were surging along the uneven and dry seabed toward the broken Aubrey's defense line. The sand and dust stirred up by the Beta army's march could be seen from the rolling smoke and dust on the horizon even without high-altitude detection. However, this was not all of the Beta army's attacks. At the feet of the Beta army that stirred up the billowing sand and dust, under this dry seabed, waves of subtle tremors were approaching from afar, quietly launching a shadow attack toward Aubrey from afar. Fortunately, these tremors had already been captured by the son of a pill slave floating above the night sky. "Captain, the sensors have found something." As soon as CIC heard the warning from the headset, he immediately turned to look at the command position. There, Teresa, Carrie, and Richard Mardukas were discussing their next course of action. Teresa, who heard the report, raised her head. "Report the situation." Carrie's heart skipped a beat when she heard the CIC's voice. "Captain Teresa, is it the possibility you mentioned before?" The son of a pill slave from the Britannia Empire naturally had a deeper understanding of the Beta. Even before he met up with Teresa, the son of Dan's slave had been beaten to a pulp by this group of monsters that had suddenly appeared, just like Aubrey. Yes, the Beta would not only attack on the ground. In those monster nests, there were even larger and more terrifying existences. And these individuals have all kinds of strange functions. One of them is the ability to burrow underground and deliver smaller individuals to the vicinity of the target, or even the larger individuals in the central area. Under the CIC's actions, the coordinates of the abnormal signals lit up one by one on the main screen. Teresa slowly explained to Carrie. After the previous exchange, Aubrey's side, led by Carrie, approved of the assistance of the Dan slave's son. Regardless of whether Teresa or the pill slave's son was hiding something from her, the current situation made it impossible for her to consider anything else. Everything was focused on how to protect Aubrey as much as possible under the attack of the Beta. Carrie's gaze fell on the main screen. Abnormal signals labeled A1 to A2, J1 to H1 flashed past. It would appear that those monsters are unwilling to spare any of Aubrey's people. You're right. In all directions. Judging from the abnormal signals displayed on the main screen, these abnormal signals from the depths of the ground had surrounded Aubrey from all directions. The Beta army on the ground was just a cover. What made Teresa feel strange was that the information she saw about the Beta did not seem to mention that the Beta would use strategy. Is it a coincidence? Thinking of this, Teresa could not help but narrow her eyes slightly, and her right hand subconsciously pinched her braid and rubbed it slightly. Or, these disgusting monsters are being manipulated by someone behind the scenes? Is it that person? In an instant, Teresa thought of the body that caused the world to change drastically, and the girl called Anna by Mimi. But on second thought, Teresa rejected this conjecture. If the girl named Anna had such a terrifying force from the beginning, she would not have been repelled by Ray Minkai with the help of the huge energy overflowing from the world's upheaval and once again summoned the brave king. Then, the speculation continued to advance. Teresa constructed one possibility after another in her mind. In the end, these possibilities all pointed to the same guess: the Parliament of Destiny. If the girl named Anna was awakened by the Parliament of Destiny, then these disgusting bugs may also become a pawn in the hands of the Parliament of Destiny. A pawn to conquer the world and destroy the world. Thinking of this, Teresa shook her head slightly and threw these thoughts that could not help the current situation to the back of her mind. Prime Minister. Since you have decided to concentrate all forces near the bright night mass accelerator, then the next thing will be much simpler. What do you mean? Carrie looked at the main screen worriedly. The abnormal signals that pressed from all directions had closed up, leaving no gap at all. The Beta army on the ground is a cover, we can ignore it for the time being. The only thing we have to pay attention to is there. Teresa raised her hand and pointed, and an abnormal signal with the calculated coordinates of the surprise attack was locked on. Flames ignited in the sky. The thick smoke from the burning flames struggled to leave clear trails in the air. From the back of the island to the vast and dry seabed. Facing the scorching sun, with a sharp whistling sound, it completed the air maneuver at an altitude of thousands of meters, and with a head-down maneuver, it slammed into the dry seabed below. Boom! Hundreds of missiles surrounded the island where the bright night mass accelerator was located and drew a circle on the map. These missiles were not ordinary missiles. Among them, there was support from the Sons of Dan's Slave, highly targeted ground-penetrating missiles. Of course, with the reserves of the Sons of Dan's Slave, they would not have so many ground-penetrating missiles. Among these missiles, in addition to the support of the Sons of Dan's Slave, there were also the ones left by Aubrey himself, pulled out from the warehouse that had never been destroyed. The roar of the earth breaking through was the effect of a special warhead. It tore through the earth and reached the depths of the earth, reaching the many abnormal signals that had long been locked on by the Sons of Dan's Slave. That was from the Beta army, a rare super-large individual, the Carrier-class Beta. This time, 4 Carrier-class Betas, which should have rarely appeared in one breath and launched an underground surprise attack on Aubrey from 4 directions. However, these Betas, who rarely use tactics, did not know that Teresa had long been on guard against their actions. The ground-penetrating missiles that broke through the Earth's crust and reached the huge gushing hole dug by the Carrier-class Betas deep underground were proof. Among the broken gravel, the ground-penetrating missiles that reached the gushing hole either plunged into the ground of the gushing hole or simply smashed heavily into the Carrier-class Beta's shell that even the ship's cannon could not destroy. Then, continuous explosions instantly filled the huge gushing hole hidden deep underground. The blazing flames of the explosion rolled in this narrow space, rolling again and again, launching a high-temperature impact on all the enemies that should not exist in this world like a tide. However, in the flames that burned everything, the huge Carrier-class Beta remained unmoved. It broke through the rock formation in a seemingly slow but actually fast way and launched a surprise attack on Aubrey firmly. For the Carrier-class Beta with a shell that could defend against the attack of the ship's cannon, these high-temperature attacks that could melt ordinary steel were nothing at all. However, was the attack of the Sons of Dan's Slave limited to this? No. There were all kinds of information, and even the Sons of Dan's Slave with more powerful weapons would not be limited to this. Among the hundreds of ground-penetrating missiles, there was a special warhead that Teresa had specially arranged to add to them, Freya. This map-editor-level weapon of mass destruction, presented in the name of Schnitzer and researcher Nina Einstein, had become one of the equipment sequences of the Britannia Empire's army. Among them, with Teresa's privileges, she was naturally able to obtain a certain amount of equipment. Therefore, Teresa, who once again controlled the Sons of Dan's Slave, decisively equipped the Sons of Dan's Slave with all the Freya she could obtain. Until now, the moment had come when she could use this weapon of mass destruction to open up the situation. In an instant, in the flames that scorched everything, a terrifying energy erupted with a bang. A huge gushing hole, the Carrier-class Beta that was firmly advancing in the rock formation became a thing of the past in the blink of an eye. Along with their disappearance, it was so intense that even without using sensors, one could rely on their legs to feel the great power of this terrifying energy explosion suddenly arrive. The earth was roaring, sand and dust were splashing, cracks tore open the dry seabed, engulfing the Beta army that was rushing through the billowing sand and dust. Whether it was the soldier class or the huge fortress class, they could not stand for a moment under this terrifying power of nature. Rumble! There was only one sound left between heaven and earth. A roar that tore the earth apart, a roar that came from the depths of the ground. Boom! Boom! While the dry seabed was torn apart by the crisscrossing cracks, 3 huge pits with a diameter of at least 1,000 meters and a depth of about 100 meters were blasted out by the explosion of Freya. In the pits that were filled with blazing heat and remnants of terrifying energy that could destroy everything, one could vaguely see charred and mutilated limbs. This blow directly destroyed the Beta's plan to attack Aubrey from underground. Rumble! In the huge crack, billowing smoke and dust suddenly exploded. A ferocious and disgusting huge body rushed out of the ground like a wild behemoth, carrying crisscrossing scars all over its body. In the blink of an eye, a dazzling bright red pool flowed out of the fragmented seabed, and its body slammed to the ground. It was an carrier-class Beta that was lucky enough to escape Freya's bombardment. However, judging from the scars all over its body, it was already at the end of its road. In the next second, the Beta army that was sacrificed to protect rushed out of the sharp mouthparts, stepping on the ground that was constantly shaking, and rushed towards Aubrey. Chapter 852. The breeze brought the smell of smoke, making the Aubrey soldiers in the Huey defense line gulp. From the first missile to the present, these Aubrey soldiers still could not see a single Beta appear in front of them. They only saw the smoke from the missile that almost covered the sky. They only heard the rumbling of the explosion. But as the smoke in the sky became denser and denser, the sound of the explosion got closer and closer, and there was a slight change in the Huey defense line. All combat units, please pay attention. I am Carly Yura Ashar. Thanks to everyone's efforts in the previous battle, we were able to hold on to the end until reinforcements arrived, but those monsters did not give up on killing us. Therefore, this will be our last battle. In the headset, in the loudspeaker, and in the cockpit. At the same time, Carly's voice came. Carly's head lit up. This was the last of Aubrey's strength. There were less than 4,000 Aubrey soldiers who could participate in this defensive battle. There were less than 100 armored vehicles, including tanks. There were less than 5 teams of the MS Brigade, led by the M1 Heretics and Murasame. Not to mention the remaining artillery, missiles, and other firepower equipment that consumed a lot of energy. This was the best that Carly could find and bring out. Now that the main island and the surrounding islands, large and small, had fallen one after another, Carly's trump card had been exhausted. This was especially true for all kinds of armored vehicles, which were supposed to be the backbone of the defense line. On the day of the main island's fall, they were quickly destroyed by the BETs that Teresa called assault level. Aubrey, this is our home. We can't let these monsters trample on our home as they please. For this, I'm willing to give my life and hold the line with you until that moment comes. So, everyone, please help me. When Carly's voice fell, the communication was cut off. Along with it, captivating red descended from the son of Dan's slave and hovered over the Huey defense line. Everything was said without words. Carrie's speech before the battle didn't cause any cheers or impassioned words. Instead, there were countless pairs of eyes that had become incomparably resolute, faces that were unafraid of death, and hands that were tightly gripping the handles of their guns and the joystick. That's amazing! Teresa, who had returned to the captain's seat, pinched her braids slightly. Kukli Yura Ashar is a qualified leader. Richard Madukas seemed to have a good opinion of Carrie. Really? However, he was indeed much stronger than many people. Standing on that bloody battlefield and witnessing the moment her trusted guardian died for her, she was still able to persevere on the front lines. This perseverance is worthy of recognition. From the first time Teresa had seen Carrie, she had noticed the stretcher covered with white cloth that Carrie was guarding. However, due to certain reasons, Teresa would not be rude to ask about these things. However, from the information she obtained from Ray Minkai, Teresa already had a certain understanding of the people around Carrie. But now was not the time to focus on these things. Yes, Madukas. How's the sensor? The lethality of the Son of Dan Nu's missile C tactic was undoubtedly terrifying. However, due to the Freya mixed in with the ordinary warheads, the sensors laid around Huey were also damaged by the violent geological changes caused by the Freya explosion. This caused the Son of Dan Nu to lose the monitoring of the surrounding geological vibrations while killing the aircraft carrier level Beta that attempted to launch an attack from the ground. It could be said that killing 1,000 enemies and losing 700 of their own. Although the loss was only a few hundred sensors. However, it would take some time to re-establish the monitoring network. This was the price Teresa had to bear when she decided on this tactic. Yes, just as the result of the tactical simulation, the entire monitoring network has failed. Less than 1 out of 10 sensors can be maintained. Richard Madukas responded and waited for Teresa's next decision. Hey, Madukas, do you need to play chess? Play chess? Richard Madukas was taken aback and seemed to be unable to react. This scene in the past doesn't seem to have happened, right? Richard coughed slightly to hide his astonishment. Cough. I played chess for a period of time when I was young. Then, if the opponent takes a general step towards you, how will you react? Teresa's right hand that was pinching her braids slightly exerted force, and a trace of an arc quietly climbed up the corner of her mouth. Richard Madukas subconsciously replied, Yes. Counterattack. Yes. Counterattack. Teresa paused, and a trace of anticipation appeared in her eyes. I'm looking forward to the enemy's counterattack. That is, if there is really a mastermind behind those monsters. Roar! Stepping on the broken ground, the Beta that erupted with bursts of roars continued to accelerate, and accelerate again. Even the rocks and hills that were rumbling due to the violent geological changes could not hide the sand and dust that was stirred up. It was like a bright light in the sea, wantonly announcing the existence of the Beta army to the human defenders who were waiting for them. Dozens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, as the violent geological changes gradually stabilized, the Beta that came from nowhere emerged from all directions, running all the way along the path trampled by the first wave of Beta that launched the attack. Report. The scale of Beta has broken through the military scale, and the number is rising sharply. The radar of the Son of Dan's slave was constantly refreshing the number of Beta monitored by it. Whenever the scale of Beta increased sharply to a certain threshold, a harsh alarm would sound. The interval between the number of times even became shorter and shorter. As expected, Richard Madukas nodded slightly. It seemed that Teresa's prediction was correct. These monsters that seemed to only launch a swarm of bees were likely to be manipulated by a mastermind behind the scenes. Otherwise, according to the intelligence, even if the Son of the Dan slave had Freya as a trump card, these monsters would still attack like a swarm of bees. They would not have used a few aircraft-level BETs as bait to lure out Freya, the trump card, before launching more troops into this deadly battle. Madukas. Is Wilba in position? Yes. Ura's 6 has launched enemy detection. After a pause, Richard Madukas was a little hesitant. Madukas. Is there a problem? After all, they had been partners for a long time, so Teresa immediately noticed Richard Madukas's doubts. Yes, sir. Although the ultra-long-range observation device equipped by Ura's 6 is very advanced, I'm afraid the enemy won't be so easy. Boom! Suddenly, a violent tremor swept through the Son of Dan's slave and the bridge. Report. Our starboard side was attacked, but it has been successfully defended by the radiation shield. The attack just now was just the aftermath of the explosion. What? It's just the aftermath? Richard Madukas was shocked and instinctively associated it with an individual among the Beta. Compared to Richard Maduka's, Teresa was much calmer. Look, Maduka's. The enemy's counterattack has arrived. Wilbur, have you locked on to the target? On the deck, under the layers of radiation shields, a pair of sharp eyes were observing the surroundings. Locked on to the target. Position 632,510. Distance 720. The coordinates have been uploaded to the server. Wearing a full blindfold designed for ultra-long-range viewing devices, Kurlutz carefully confirmed the observed coordinates while quickly entering the data and uploading it to the server of the Son of Dan Slave. Very good. C3D1E1 launch tubes, fire. Above the Son of Dan Slave, there were a few more white tails rising into the air. Distance 720? Such a long distance, I'm afraid it's the monster that fought against the Prime Minister. Very likely. However, we can't rule out the existence of other individuals. Teresa pondered for a moment, then asked. Immediately load all the empty launch tubes according to Plan C. Yes. Start loading according to Plan C immediately. Looking at the CIC who passed down the order, Richard Maduka's clearly felt some changes in Teresa. She seemed to be preparing for another move. Maduka's. It seems that we have underestimated the mastermind behind the scenes. No, our eyes miss something. Captain, what do you mean? Teresa put down the braid in her hand and raised her right hand to point to the bottom left of the main screen. There didn't seem to be anything special there. From a bird's eye view from above, it was just a piece of retreating seawater that looked barren. Of course, Richard Maduka's didn't think that this was Teresa's random guess. In doubt, Richard Maduka's moved his gaze back and forth from the main screen. Then, a flash of inspiration. In the dim underground, there were waves of screams and roars echoing. It was the roar of monsters. It was the wandering of monsters. It was the rampage of monsters. Amidst this terrifying shriek, a pale green radiance that flickered as if it was breathing illuminated the vast space hidden deep within the ground. Boom! 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 In the space, a muffled sound that sounded like a beating heart echoed. In this muffled sound, a footstep that was easy to ignore slowly appeared from the darkness. It stood in front of a ball of meat that emitted a green light, suspended in the air, and slowly rolled like a ball of meat that was violently mixed together. The operation this time has slowed down. My cute pet. The moment the unpleasant screech of metal friction sounded, the muffled sound that echoed in the vast space suddenly stopped, and even the green light fell into darkness. Ha! Don't be afraid, my cute pet. After all, there were always accidents, weren't there? As long as you can complete my mission within the time limit, I won't hold you accountable for your mistakes. I promise in the name of Miss. Chapter 853. The Miss A in the previous chapter was remembered wrongly. The correct name should be Mr. A. A member of the Parliament of Destiny, Mr. A. Tot-a-tot. Boom, boom, boom. Machine gun. Artillery. When the sound of the beam gun once again raged above Ob, it was the most intense moment of the battlefield. The soldiers hiding behind the bunker sometimes fired, sometimes picked up grenades, and threw them at the ferocious and pale monsters that were temporarily delayed by the obstacles not far ahead. Amidst the explosion of the grenades, the unique tearing sound of the machine guns of the platoon followed closely behind, tearing the pale and ugly monsters into pieces. Attack! Attack! The frontline commander lying next to the machine gun shouted orders while delivering ammunition to the machine gunners. Behind it, the tanks turned their turrets and locked on to the scorpion monster that was hiding behind the pale, ugly monster named Enlistee. Interceptor class. This kind of monster was terrifying enough just by looking at it, but it posed a great threat to bunkers, and even equipment troop. But now, with Ob paying a painful price and the information provided by Dan New's son, Ob's soldiers had greatly reduced their fear of these monsters. At least, they knew what to do when facing these monsters' attack. In the firepower net formed by machine guns and artillery, the smaller soldier-class monsters fell like harvested wheat, revealing the scorpion monsters among them. Then, a beam of light pierced through the air and killed the interceptor-class monsters one by one. Even if a few of these scorpion monsters could catch the incoming beam in time, they still couldn't use their pair of claws that were hard enough to break the armor of the tank to block the beam attack. Buzz. The moment when the air was still hot, the head of the ugly monster in Carrie's eyes was penetrated and fell on the ground with a burst of smoke. Everyone, try to aim at the head. Carrie knew that the interceptor class's claws were nothing to the M1 Heretic, the Type 71 and 72 beam rifles equipped by Murasame. But to be on the safe side, Carrie still gave the order to try to kill the interceptor-class monsters in one shot. The Obu army could not afford any more losses. In the last line of defense built around Huey, every Aubrey soldier, every armored vehicle, every cannon, and even every MS was an unbearable loss. Fortunately, at this critical moment, Aubrey still had a reliable ally to lend a helping hand. In the sky, the clearly visible tail of smoke did not disperse for a long time. Since the start of the battle, the rumbling from the sky had not stopped for a long time. It was a missile attack from the son of Dan Nu. It was also because of the cover provided by the Pill Slave's son that the Radiant Knight defense line was able to handle the situation with ease. But how long could this situation last? The terrifying might of the first wave of missiles launched by the son of Dan Nu had been witnessed by Carrie. It wouldn't be the nuclear bomb that Katrina knew of. Instead, it would be a completely new and unknown weapon that possessed the same level of power as the nuclear bomb in Katrina's mind. No, it would likely be even more powerful. Especially when Carrie, who was on the bridge, saw Teresa's indifference when she ordered the use of the weapon called Freya. She felt an indescribable emotion in her heart. No, now is not the time to think about this. Carrie, who was sitting in the cockpit of the Crimson Assault, raised her hand and patted her face, forcing herself to concentrate. Chisaka! The moment she instinctively called out that name, Carrie was stunned. She then bit her lip and forced herself to focus on the battle in front of her. Ka! The moment the trigger on the joystick was pulled, a beam of light burst out from the Crimson Assault's beam rifle, crossing a long distance and blowing up an interceptor that had rushed to the front of a bunker. Chisaka was no more. Seeing the monsters killed by the beam rifle one by one, sadness rose in Carrie's heart, but her face was unusually calm. Now, she still had something she had to do. The Beta army that was close to the Radiant Knight defense line was eventually repelled. Facing the trenches that were almost filled with the corpses of the Beta, the sound of vomiting could be heard from the bunkers of the human side one after another. After the fierce battle, the human soldiers, who were slightly relaxed, had probably realized that the scene in front of them was already a terrifying hellish scene. Was it the commanding officer's scolding? Not really. Instead, it was a towel, a bottle of hot water, and a big hand patting on the shoulder. In this battle, as long as they failed, there was only death. No matter how young the soldiers were, there were only two results. Either they died, or they forced themselves to grow quickly. The only fortunate thing was that the enemy that fell in the blood-red puddle was not human. Report the consumption of ammunition. Organize people to patrol the front line. Don't miss any wounded. The Beta's first wave of attack was easily repelled, but it did not make Carrie happy. Doubt still lingered in his heart without dispersing. Compared to the previous offensive, this wave of attack was too weak, and even a little too straightforward. Such a clean and neat retreat was not like the monster race mentioned in the intelligence, who did not know life and death and only knew how to attack to the death. At this time, the communication from the son of the Dan slave rang. "Prime Minister, how's the situation in the position?" On the screen, Teresa's calm appearance was still the same. "The situation is good. Those bugs were beaten away before they could rush to the position." Carrie nodded and replied while checking the damage of the landline. Is that so? Then, there will be an operation next. The detailed plan has been sent to you. Carrie lowered her gaze and saw that there was indeed an icon flashing at the bottom left of the screen. Open browse then, Carrie's eyebrows furrowed tightly. How confident are you? 70%. Carrie was silent for a moment, then nodded. Okay. When the sound of the human artillery became slightly sparse, the beta that retreated from the human front line did not disperse. Instead, they quickly gathered toward a certain coordinate, like a well-trained army that had received orders. In the depths of the dim underground, the figure was still standing in front of the meatball that was flickering with a pale green light. What? Abandoning the human body to achieve such a great existence makes you so disgusted? You have to know that your hometown has been destroyed by your own hands. The unpleasant, ear-piercing sound of metal rubbing against each other echoed in this underground space, fiercely stimulating the meatball and the existence hidden deep in the meatball. Dong. Dong dong dong. The rapid jumping sounds were like the beating of a drum, getting louder and louder, more and more rumbling. However, the deafening sound of jumping caused the figure to laugh out loud. Ha 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 ha. Yes. That's it. That's it. Release all of your hatred. Release all the hatred you have for me, Mr. A. That's right. I am the culprit who caused the destruction of your hometown. I caused you, Elizabeth Amir, who should have stood at the top of the empire and been praised by millions of people, to become like this, the culprit who destroyed your hometown with your own hands. Come on. Come on. Come on. Completely burn your hatred. Completely release your hatred for me. Then, personally send this world to the same fate of destruction as your hometown. In the name of MR.A. The ear-piercing and high-pitched sound of metal was so crazy and terrifying. But there was another sound that tore this crazy sound apart. Hum! A beam of light poured down from the top of the hall, enveloping the figure in it. Boom! The moment the high-temperature particle beam exploded, it seemed to be frozen, condensing in mid-air, condensing above the figure's head. Sigh, there was a sigh. With a wave of the hand, the frozen particle beam dissipated. The figure appeared again. Why don't you understand? Only in this way can you live up to the name of war you have, Amir. Dong, dong, dong. The irritable agitation continued to jump. However, this irritation did not erupt at the figure, but at the battlefield on the ground. Roar! The beta's roar resounded through the sky again. Bursts of sand and dust swept up, accompanied by the large and small beta army that once again showed an increasing trend of numbers rushing into the sky. Rumble! At this moment, the beta's galloping movement on the ground was like a small earthquake. It constantly shook the heartstrings of the human soldiers on the bright night defense line. Looking at the water in the cup on the table that was constantly rippling. Looking at the magazine that was creaking in the vibration and moving towards the edge of the table, sensing the increasingly obvious and intense tremors coming from beneath their feet, the Aubrey soldiers who had yet to recover from the previous battle looked at each other. In silence, they quickly picked up their weapons and ran back to the battle positions they were defending. Report. The beta is attacking again. According to the radar scan, after the first wave of beta attack, the number of remaining beta was less than 3,000, but this time, the number of beta has shown signs of increasing again. The Son of Dan Slave's radar locked onto the beta's movements immediately. In addition, multiple new appearance points have been found in Beta A1 and A3 areas. It is suspected to be the beta's hidden reinforcement hole. Listening to the report from her subordinates, Teresa rubbed her fingers and inadvertently began to rub her braids again. Madukas. Look, the pair of black hands are indeed hidden underground. Indeed. Just as the commander expected. Richard Madukas stared at the radar scan on the main screen, unwilling to let go of any clues. But something is strange. When her soft hair swept past the wing of her nose, Teresa seemed to notice that something was wrong. Strange? Yes, it's a little strange. Teresa frowned slightly and ordered casually. Except for beta signal screens in beta A1 and A3 areas, mark them according to the time of appearance of each signal. Yes, Commander. CIC's processing speed was very fast. In less than a minute, the results Teresa wanted were presented on the main screen. What? Is this a declaration of war? Or a provocation? In Maduka's bewildered gaze, a group of words appeared on the main screen. KLLM. Teresa bit her lips, and her gaze became a little solemn. Kill me? Chapter 854. This is a declaration of war. Richard Madukas adjusted his glasses and expressed his opinion. Teresa, who placed her right hand back on the armrest, shook her head. No, Madukas. This is not just a declaration of war. For some reason, Teresa did not completely agree with Richard Maduka's opinion. On the main screen, the words that were connected by many holes made Teresa feel a little strange. It was like a torch that was deliberately lit in the fog. While it was noticeable, it also made people unable to see its true appearance. Continue the battle plan. Yes, sir. Since the start of the battle, the rolling thunder clouds in the sky had spread to the sky above the night sky. In an instant, the sky and earth were pitch black. Only the brief light scattered by the rolling thunder, the burning artillery fire, and the eyes of the monsters that seemed to come from the netherworld were left. Steady, steady. Add flares at any time. The frontline commander of OB commanded the battle with a hoarse voice. Compared to the armored vehicles and MS with night vision equipment, the only thing the infantrymen could rely on in the dimly lit environment was the flares. Buzz. The buzzing sound of the beam sabers resonated through the front line. Monsters that were a few times bigger than tanks fell one after another under the beam swords wielded by the MS. In less than a few minutes, the gigantic corpses blocked this section of the line of defense, making it impossible for the soldiers and armored vehicles to effectively stop the enemy. Infantrymen and armored vehicles withdraw from this section of the line of defense. Leave it to the MS 2nd Squadron. Not far away, Carey had already noticed the situation and made a prompt decision to give the order. This was a decision he had no choice but to make. If they relied on the MS alone, they would not be able to completely stop the attack of the monsters. After all, there were a lot of small individuals among the monsters. Boom! Boom! Suddenly, just as the infantrymen and armored vehicles withdrew, two black shadows fell from the sky and exploded among the monsters. Amidst the rolling flames, two airframes that were different from the AUBMS, but they were not unfamiliar, landed steadily on the newly vacated position. "It's you guys?" She immediately recognized it as the M9X that the son of Dan knew was carrying. "We meet again, my lovely princess." Sure enough, it was Melissa Mao who was driving the M9X, as well as Sosuke Xiangliang. According to the battle plan, when the beta launched the second wave of attack, Melissa Mao and Sosuke Sagara must support the Kagaya defense line as soon as possible, and then wait for an opportunity to penetrate the beta army and enter the area locked by the son of the Dan slave. Of course, this goal was very simple. However, according to Teresa's many arrangements, Melissa and Sosuke Sagara would have to cooperate with the MS Aubrey team led by Carey to resist the beta's attack for a while before they could find a suitable opportunity for the two of them to attack. However, Teresa had calculated everything, but she didn't expect that after obtaining the new M9X, Melissa Mao's heart, which was always eager to try things out, would drive this female captain to take a risky step. In the flames, Beta's screams came from the headset, but it did not shake Melissa's tenacious nerves. Right now, she only cared about one thing. "Ura's 7, how is it? Has the Lambda drive been successfully activated?" Sosuke Xiangliang, who was controlling the landline, was stunned for a moment. He subconsciously looked at the bottom right of the main screen. Yes. The sign representing the activation of the Lambda drive lit up. Z1, report the status of the Lambda drive. It had the same configuration as the M9. When the M9X welcomed the pilot, it would also activate the partner AI to cooperate with the pilot in battle. However, for some reason, the M9X's AI did not follow the M9's instructions and let the pilot name it according to his preferences. Instead, it directly named it according to the order of the production batch number. This point would undoubtedly make Melissa complain again and again, but it also made Sosuke Xiangliang feel relieved. Yes, now that the Lambda drive has been activated, the compatibility between the various data and the pilot's spirit has reached 90%. Hearing the results of Sosuke Xiangliang's report, Melissa's mouth suddenly curved into a smile. Then, Yura's 7 mission begins. The moment Melissa's M9X suddenly erupted with an astonishing amount of heat, it had already rushed 100 meters away. At the same time, the crowded beta in front of them suddenly bloomed like 100 flowers, scattering dazzling red flowers in all directions. Wait. Yura's 2. Our mission still needs to cooperate with Aubrey's MS team to defend. It's not time to attack yet. As soon as he saw Melissa's M9X that had rushed into the beta pile, Sosuke Xiangliang's mind suddenly exploded. He had no idea what was going on at all. If it was Cruz Wilba, Sosuke Xiangliang could understand. But if it was Melissa Mao, it made Sosuke Xiangliang a little confused. Defense? Yura's 7, what are you talking about? Offense is the best defense. What's more, we now have such a powerful weapon. With the help of the Lambda drive system, the bullets fired from the 60mm submachine gun equipped with the M9X were endowed with terrifying destructive power. The moment each bullet hit the first beta, it did not stop in its body. Instead, under the ultra-high speed given by the Lambda drive system, it pierced through the beta and killed the next one, and the next one. It did not stop killing the target until it came to a standstill. Thus, in front of Melissa's M9X, there was an unusually straight blood-red trajectory that was filled with blood mist. It was like a trench that separated the overcrowded BTA army into pieces. It was especially eye-catching. Oh, it feels good. Seeing the masterpiece in front of her, Melissa whistled. Then, with a slight movement of her right foot, her M9X immediately flashed back and forth like a ghost among the beta army. The crisscrossing trenches, formed by the bloody mist, had already torn the beta army that was charging into this area into pieces. This scene made Sosuke Xiangliang's eyelids twitch wildly. After being partners for so many years, it was the first time Sosuke Xiangliang saw Melissa Mao with such a violent side. Is it the influence of the Lambda drive system? When he was familiar with the M9X, Sosuke Xiangliang had learned from the Empire's researchers about the Lambda drive system equipped with the M9X. This was the latest generation of the Lambda drive system developed by the Empire after combining its own technology, theories, and technical theories provided by Whisper, Teresa, and Sarah. Although it had roughly the same performance as the Lambda drive system used by Sosuke Xiangliang, there were some subtle differences. For example, when the Lambda drive system was activated, it would be adjusted according to the changes in the pilot's situation. To put it simply, if the pilot was stimulated and an uncontrollable situation occurred, the new generation of the Lambda drive system would automatically stimulate the pilot's emotions so that he could maintain his fighting spirit and continue to fight. But Melissa's current situation did not seem to require such an adjustment. Yura's 7. What are you waiting for? Follow me. Melissa, who was in the midst of killing, looked back and did not find any trace of Sosuke Xiangliang following her. She immediately scolded him. The familiar scolding made Sosuke Xiangliang shrink his neck involuntarily. It seemed that he was paranoid. Boom! Suddenly, the moment Sosuke Xiangliang caught up with Melissa's footsteps, A strong light that illuminated the world suddenly erupted from the horizon. It crossed the vast sky and went straight for the son of the pill slave above the bright night defense line. It's a beam attack. Son of the pill slave. Melissa's pupils shrank and subconsciously looked at the screen, looking for the signal that represented the son of the pill slave. The result was reassuring. Yuras 2, continue the mission with URUZ 7. Without waiting for Melissa and Sosuke Xiangliang to reply, the message from the son of the pill slave arrived first. Yes. Understood. A blazing aura lingered in the air. Waves of heat from the sky attacked the bright night defense line from top to bottom. The Aubrey soldiers in the middle could not help but raise their heads and look at the warship protected by many octagonal light shields. Prime Minister, don't worry about the son of the pill slave. Continue to follow the battle plan. Although the attack just now looked extremely terrifying, it was actually unable to break through the son of the pill slave's radiation shield. It's just an appetizer. Just as Teresa's voice fell, several rays of light rose from the southwest, northwest, and west directions of the bright night defense line. The enemy's attack was coming. This was the main event. Other than the necessary energy to maintain the flight posture, all the remaining energy will be used on the radiation shield. Understood. No one dared to neglect Teresa's orders. Moreover, the competition between energy weapons had always been very straightforward. There was no other reason. It was a competition of energy intensity. Boom! Rumble! In the sky, 3 terrifying beams of light cut through the sky under the horrified gazes of the Aubrey soldiers and directly bombarded the son of the pill slave's light shield. At this moment, a bright and dazzling sun rose above the bright night defense line. The sudden burst of blazing heat caused the Aubrey soldiers to instinctively hide in the bunkers, the simple bunkers of the defense line, and even the bottom of the damaged armored vehicles. Even the MS, which had the ability to automatically adjust the temperature of the cockpit, had to raise the shield in its hand as much as possible to block the terrifying shock wave from high up in the sky to prevent the various sensors on the body from being affected and malfunctioning. What followed was a huge explosion that stole the sound of heaven and earth. The ear-piercing sirens were incessant, but Teresa still sat in her seat calmly, quietly waiting for the next result. Beep beep. The moment the static sounded, Teresa's eyes flashed. Got you. On the main screen, a new target specially marked as 01 kept jumping. That was the result of Teresa's inference based on the battlefield situation and then combined with the movements of the Beta Army. The mastermind behind the scenes was the hive that controlled the Beta Army to attack Aubrey. Chapter 855. The moment the ammunition in the magazine was emptied, the M9X piloted by Sosuke Xiangliang appeared in front of Melissa. Yuras 2, quickly change the ammunition. The son of Dan's slave has found the target. After receiving the information of the hive's location, Sosuke Xiangliang immediately intervened in Melissa's frenzied killing. He was afraid that Melissa would be so engrossed in killing that she would forget the next step of the mission. Of course, this was only Sosuke Xiangliang's personal worry. As an experienced veteran, even if Melissa was engrossed in killing, she still remembered what she should do. Oh, confirm the information. Melissa slowly exhaled and smiled. Really? I didn't expect Sosuke Xiangliang to care about people one day. What? Sosuke Xiangliang, who was driving the mech, raised the submachine gun in one hand and waved the blade in the other to kill all the attacking betas, did not seem to hear Melissa's sigh. Nothing. Nothing. Yuras 6. Did you find the cute baby? Gotcha. The moment Melissa's voice fell, her M9X finished changing the magazine. Oh, big sister. Found it. I can see it clearly now. The voice from the son of Dan's slave's deck sounded clearly from the communication device. See it clearly? Your eyes weren't blinded by that thing, right? Melissa's feet moved, and her M9X immediately leapt up. She leapt over the head of Xiangliang Sosuke's M9X, unsheathing the blade at her waist, and with a slash cleaved an interceptor in half. In the bloody mist that rose into the air, the blade wrapped in the faint light caused by the lambda drive system suddenly cut horizontally to the left. Swoosh! With a soft sound, the right limb of the other interceptor level beta was severed. 2. 3 bullets followed closely, and the moment the interceptor beta fell to the ground, several holes appeared on its body. Yura's too. We must move faster. Sosuke Xiangliang seemed to have discovered something and appeared a little nervous. Before Melissa could ask, Kurlut's whistle came from the communication device. Wow. Big sister. A lot of bugs appeared in front of you. There are at least 10,000 of them. What? 10,000? Melissa and Xiangliang Zongjie exclaimed in shock, while the other gulped. Can't we kill all these bugs? Melissa and Sagara Sosuke, who were in the midst of the battle, might not be able to see further, but Kurlutz, who was on the deck of the Son of Dan's slave, could see very clearly. In the distance, on the opposite side of the battlefield, bottomless pits continued to appear on the ground. From these pits, there seemed to be an endless tide of betas emerging. As a result, Kurlutz, who was overlooking the battlefield, saw an amazing scene. A monstrous wave formed by the beta army was heading towards Melissa and Sosuke Xiangliang. No, it was heading towards the Bright Night defensive line. The shocking scene made Cruz's hands tremble, and he quickly connected the internal line connected to the bridge. Sir! There was a situation. The enemy has turned out in full force. However, Teresa remained unmoved. Yes, I got it. Inform the Obi army that the battle plan will enter the third phase. Let the Obi army hold on. After a pause, there seemed to be a trace of reluctance in Teresa's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by determination. Tell Prime Minister Carey that the reinforcements will be here soon. Reinforcements? When she heard the news from the Son of Dan's slave, Carey had already seen the sandstorm that occupied the horizon, getting closer and closer, and the closer it was, the more thrilling it was. In the rolling sandstorm, the number of betas, big and small, were swarming in. At this moment, the Obi army that was guarding the Bright Night defensive line already knew the upcoming outcome. Those bugs. Have they launched a general attack? Strange. The Bright Red assault, which had completed emergency maintenance, stopped in the central position of the Bright Night defensive line. Carey stood in front of the cockpit and looked at the increasingly spectacular sandstorm. However, by her side, she could no longer see the silent and firm figure that had been protecting her. When an inaudible sigh drifted away with the wind, Carey's face was already hidden in the helmet. Pass the order. All troops, fight to the death. Even if we die, we must die in the Bright Night defensive line. I, Carey Yura Ashar, will stand here with you, and die here. Defend Obi to the death. Defend Obi to the death. Defend Obi to the death. The shouts of death resounded through the communication channel in an instant. Up to this point, the Obi soldiers who were still alive and persevering on the Bright Night defensive line already knew their fate. There was anger, there was fear, there was confusion, there were even timid attempts to escape, but now these Obi soldiers who had experienced battle after battle, witnessed their loved ones die in the attack of BTA, or personally sent their loved ones to space, only had the same thought, right? Prime Minister. After the Bright Red assault was launched, Director Simmons sent a communication from the rear. I'm ready here. However, I'm afraid we can only sustain 2 to 3 waves of attack. Moreover, we can't rule out the interference of those light-level betas. Well, we've already done well. Let's do our best to fight. In front of her was Simmons, who had a hesitant look on his face, but Carey didn't have the extra energy to delve into this point. Because the battle had already begun. The roar of the cannons resounded throughout the Bright Night defensive line like the horn of war. Hundreds of rounds. The moment thousands of cannonballs streaked across the air, it was like a meteor shower streaking across the night, bright and deadly. Boom! Boom! The meteors in the night sky fell rapidly, blasting the seemingly endless front of the Beta army into a continuous stream of fireballs, and even igniting a sea of fire that burned flesh and blood. Looking at the pale, scarlet figures shattering in the explosion and struggling in the sea of fire, Carrie's mind couldn't help but think of the information about how the Beta was formed. They seemed to be tools and soldiers that had been transformed from dead humans. Thinking of this, Carrie seemed to see the figures rolling in the sea of fire in an instant. They were the familiar Obi people. Fear? No. All Carrie had was anger. Team MS, go forward, prioritize killing the interceptor and assault level BTA. Understood. There were too many Beta players coming at them in a menacing manner. Carrie had given up on the tactics she could think of and used the most direct tactics to prioritize killing the most threatening targets in the Beta army. After the continuous roar of the cannons, the MS troops shot out a rain of light beams. Every flash of light was bound to take away an interceptor and assault level BTA. In just less than a minute, the Beta army that was under the fierce artillery attack of the OB army could not stop this monstrous wave of Beta army even if they left behind thousands or even tens of thousands of corpses. Close. Close. The Beta's blood-red eyes could be seen clearly amidst the constant flashes of artillery fire. The sulfur smell emanating from the ugly body seemed to be close at hand, and the sharp roar was deafening. They're here. Director Simmons. In the next second, a flash of light erupted behind the bright night defensive line, and smoke rose to cover the sky. Unfortunately, the moment this flash of light erupted, dozens of lasers rose behind the Beta army. In the blink of an eye, the rising smoke exploded into a series of flames. The bright night's last hope failed. Sure enough, those bugs never let us have an easy time. In the face of this scene, Simmons appeared calm. Because it was just a wave of seemingly powerful, but in fact it was just a bait. Its purpose was to cover the subsequent offensive of the Sons of Dan Slave. Simmons knew very well that Obi's pitiful inventory alone could not hold on. The only thing he could do was to adjust his position as much as possible and assist the Sons of Dan Slave in battle. Therefore, the moment the target successfully lured out the light-level Beta hidden in the Beta army, a bloody line appeared in the air, tearing through the billowing sand and dust. It created a straight and bloody line in the middle of the Beta army that was surging forward. Bang! On the deck of the Sons of Dan Slave, bursts of powerful recoil were transmitted to the hull of the Sons of Dan Slave through the offset mechanism, and Kurlutz had killed all the light-level Beta that exposed his whereabouts. Along the way, he also took away many other types of Beta. Phew! The power of the Lambda drive system is really refreshing. Loosening his index finger on the trigger, Kurlutz sighed, but the haze in his heart never dissipated. From the moment the Beta army attacked the Bright Night defensive line, Melissa and Sosuke Xiangliang disappeared. Within the range of Kurlutz's vision, it was impossible to find the M9X driven by the two. There were only communication signals sent back from time to time. Suddenly, a flash of light lit up in the corner of Kurlutz's eyes. Not good. It's the princess. Boom! The light beam flashed, and an assault level was penetrated, but the huge inertia impact brought by its huge body still knocked the shield in the captivating Red Assault's hand away, and at the same time, it also opened the captivating Red Assault's door wide open. Roar! An interceptor covered in wounds followed closely and rushed to the front of the captivating Red Assault, waving its huge and hard forelimbs straight toward the cockpit of the captivating Red Assault. Boom! The deafening impact exploded on the spot, shaking Carrie, who was in the cockpit, and she was almost unable to stay awake. Fortunately, other than that, Carrie did not suffer any damage. However, Carrie, who was in a coma, was firmly protected by the PS armor equipped by the captivating Red Assault, and she was still in danger. Her subordinates, who were struggling to resist the attack of the Beta army, saw this and abandoned the enemy and rushed to the captivating Red assault, trying to rescue the captivating Red assault. However, as soon as they moved, the light-level Beta hidden in the Beta army was activated. Hum. In a few breaths, the first OB-MS team, centered around the captivating Red assault, lost 4 MSs. Boom. The M1 heresy was penetrated by the light-level Beta, and at the moment of the explosion, Carrie, who was in a short coma, woke up faintly. However, the moment she woke up, the area she was in was already turned upside down. The large and small Beta crossed the trenches, flipped over the burning tanks and armored vehicles, tore open the cockpits of the fallen MS, and dragged out the pilots who had lost their lives. Then, Carrie closed her eyes abruptly, unable to bear to watch anymore. However, the sounds of impact and knocking from the outside were endless. Carrie could not help but feel sad that she was about to follow the tragic fate of her superiors. Her survival instinct made Carrie grip the joystick tightly, and once again controlled the captivating Red assault to fight back. However, before the captivating Red assault could attack, 2 lasers struck, and the captivating Red assault's left leg and right arm were broken on the spot. The explosion caused by the blazing energy even caused the captivating Red assault's system to show signs of collapse. Looking at the flashing red light in front of her, Carrie could not help but laugh. Is this the end? Chisaka, right? Chapter 856. The moment when captivating Red's assault was drowned by the Beta army, the battlefield surveillance had already captured it clearly. That scene caused almost everyone in the command center of the Bright Night defense line to turn ashen. Especially Simmons, who was the technical support. Regarding OB's current situation, she knew all of OB's existing equipment and was very clear that OB's remnant army was able to hold on until now. In addition to the hatred of the Beta army for destroying their homeland, it was more of the support left in the hearts of many OB soldiers after the many efforts made by the young Prime Minister. Now, was OB's last support going to be devoured by that damn monster? Woo woo woo! Suddenly, an alarm sounded in the command hall. It was not the alarm of the Bright Night defense line being penetrated, but the alarm from the rear. What happened? Simmons, who seemed to have woken up from a dream, quickly asked. Unfortunately, no one answered her question, because the scene on the screen was enough to make everyone's morale drop to the lowest point. Flash. Several flashes of light suddenly rose from the rear of the Bright Night defense line, the frontline logistics support point established by the Dawn Society. Under the ear-piercing alarm, they rushed to the front line like meteors, straight to the location of captivating Red's assault. At this moment, no one knew the meaning of these flashes of light. Even Carly, who was saved by these flashes of light, was the same. A pale figure, a bright red figure, in the cockpit that was surrounded by the smell of sulfur, Carly desperately searched for a possibility that could allow herself to make captivating Red's assault fight back again. However, the small Beta that had crawled all over captivating Red's body did not allow this possibility to appear. Even if captivating Red's energy device was still operating, it could still provide energy for the PS armor to operate, enough to make these ugly monsters break all their teeth. The bright red monsters that were filled with sulfur smoke still opened their bloody mouths and bit off captivating Red's armor piece by piece. Ka. The PS armor, which was able to ignore live ammunition attacks, finally fell into a trough of energy after breaking countless monsters' teeth. Each and every bite consumed the energy of captivating Red's attack. At the same time, it also consumed the last of Carly's life in this world. There was no other way. In the end, Carrie's final effort failed to make captivating Red retaliate. The only thing left was the box under the driver's seat. As Prime Minister OB, as the current head of the Asha family, at the same time, it was also the last resort for humans. The screen in front of him kept shaking. The ear-piercing noises of external equipment being gnawed on could be heard. Beep beep beep. The moment the emergency alarm sounded, the energy of Captivating Red's assault was exhausted. Her right hand instinctively reached for the box. Let's stop here. I, Carrie Yura Ashar, will never allow myself to be manipulated by you disgusting monsters. However, her right hand had not yet touched the cold handle in the small box. Changes had already taken place. Several flashes of light fell from the sky at a speed that could not be seen by the naked eye, plunging into the monsters that were drowning Captivating Crimson. Then, a scarlet storm engulfed the surroundings. Pooh! Pooh! The muffled sounds of flesh being cut by sharp weapons became the accompaniment of this scarlet storm. In the midst of the blood fog that was rapidly spreading around, silver flashes of light were faintly discernible. Every time a silver flash flickered, one or several BETs would be cut into a pile of lifeless flesh. However, in less than a few minutes, the monsters that were drowning Captivating Crimson had turned into a pile of meaningless flesh. Looking at the monitor screen, Captivating Crimson had almost been destroyed. Now that her energy had been depleted, she miraculously escaped from danger. Looking at the monster that was crawling all over Captivating Crimson's body, gnawing on her armor, and almost dragging Carrie out of the cockpit, now strangely turned into a pile of flesh, Simmons couldn't help but gasp as he subconsciously asked, "What are you talking about? What the hell happened?" Suddenly, a thought flashed through Simmons' mind. Wait, did something happen at the Dawn Society's frontline logistics support point just now? This time, everyone in the command center reacted. It's the weapons of unknown origin stored at the support point. Just now, they were activated. They were activated for no reason. Activated? Simmons' gaze changed, and he stared blankly at the silver flash that was moving around with Captivating Crimson as the center. After those few items were discovered by Obujun, they had not responded to all of Dawn Society's attempts. Not to mention activating and attacking. Just as Simmons was bewildered, the alarm sounded again. This time, it was an air defense alarm. The only remaining air defense radar of the Bright Night Defense Line detected several unidentified targets entering the sky above the Bright Night Defense Line at a super high speed. According to calculations, the destination was the Bright Night Defense Line. To be more precise, it was the location of Captivating Crimson. Bright Night Defense Line. Please do not engage in any air defense interception. Those are reinforcements. Immediately after, a message from the son of a pill slave made the command center boil. Reinforcements, are they coming? The howls of the monsters gradually faded away. The noise that once symbolized the countdown to death had disappeared. Carrie, who was waiting for the last moment to arrive, released the cold handle, moved her fingers, and activated the backup energy of Captivating Crimson. This did not allow Captivating Crimson to regain the ability to move again. It only activated the ability to monitor and communicate with the outside world. Buzz! Looking at the main screen that lit up again, all Carrie saw was a mess. A pile of broken limbs immersed in Captivating Crimson's liquid. And a white body standing in front of Captivating Crimson. What a mess! Kali Yura Ashar. A familiar tone. A familiar voice. And that. A familiar yet unfamiliar body. That's right. What a mess. Carrie pulled the corners of her mouth, wanting to show a self-deprecating smile. But she could not smile. Not long ago, in order to save herself and Captivating Crimson, the entire Ms. team that accompanied her had lost their lives in the monster's ambush. What? Have you already lost the courage to live? Or do you want me to shoot you and send you to meet the subordinates who died for you? The white body raised its muzzle and pointed at Captivating Crimson's cockpit. But Carrie was not afraid at all. Still the same. Lund Mina Sahak. If you are here to laugh at me, as you wish. But now, please be sure to support the Bright Night Defense Line. Carrie's response made the person frown. But in the end, she still controlled the body to lower its muzzle. Just as Carrie had said, she wasn't here to laugh at her. Her goal here was to protect her motherland. In the name of Lund Mina Sahak. Humph! Mina snorted coldly, but she did not continue to mock Carrie. Then, she turned on the all-channel communication and announced her existence loudly. All soldiers of Ob, listen up. I am Lund Mina Sahak. Now, join the battle to defend Ob with your allies. Along with the announcement, there was a purple-blue beam of light that tore through the dark clouds and thousands of lightning bolts. Rumble! In an instant, this world that was covered by slaughter and lightning welcomed the light of destruction. The light of destruction swept past the bright night defense line and went straight into the rear of the Beta army. Then, from right to left, it fired fiercely at the rear of the Beta army. Boom! Boom! As the light of destruction gradually faded, it was the silent world, and after this silence, a huge roar broke out. The flames that soared into the sky with the sound of suppressing thousands of lightning bolts announced the arrival of this great momentum. A huge mushroom cloud slowly rose, breaking through the thick thunderclouds, forcing them to no longer block the sunlight, allowing the sunlight to fall through the gap between the mushroom cloud and the thunderclouds, scattering on the Beta army that was engulfed by the flames, illuminating the face of death that was erased by the light of destruction. Young. Electronic siege cannon. Carrie was not familiar with the purple-blue light, because she had once fought side by side with a battleship that had this light. Unfortunately, she did not guess correctly. A pitch-black and unfamiliar spaceship quickly descended from the clouds. Several light spots flew out from the spaceship and landed at the location where Captivating Red was at an extremely fast speed. As the distance between the two sides continued to close, Carrie's eyes changed, and she became extremely surprised. Zagu? Gouda? Zaft? While in a daze, Carrie did not forget to ask the identity of the MS that landed beside Captivating Red. Yes, Zaft. Mina's answer was unusually straightforward. It was so straightforward that Carrie was speechless and could not find a reason to speak for a while. You guys take the Prime Minister back to the rear. Leave this to me. Mina, who casually ordered, paused and then added. Leave it to me and Knight K to deal with it. Thus, Captivating Red was picked up by two Zagus, and under the cover of Gouda, they quickly left the front line and returned to the rear. Looking at the white mech that stood in place and faced the monsters that surged up again alone, more questions arose in Carrie's mind. Wait. Knight K? Knight K? All of a sudden, Carrie realized what Mina was referring to. In Carrie's memory, there was only one person who would be called that by others. How is it possible? He has clearly joined the command of Speaker Dylandal and become a core figure of Zaft in the name of the Holy Lion Knight? How could he appear here at this time? Chapter 857. Altitude 3000. Rendezvous with the son of Dan's slave. Now maintain the speed of descent and begin to enter the son of Dan's slave's protective circle. Mei Ling withdrew her gaze from the dazzling radiation shield of the son of Dan's slave and focused on guiding the Minerva's descent. After descending directly into the atmosphere from outer space, the positron siege cannon was launched directly above the thunderous sea of clouds and bombarded the sea of clouds. As CIC, Mei Ling was involved in the entire process. Especially when the positron siege cannon launched its attack, there was no visible target at all, only a guidance signal that came from nowhere. Looking at the rumbling mushroom cloud on the main screen and the thin layer of sweat on Mei Ling's forehead, Talia could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. As the captain of the Minerva, she knew very well how uncertain everyone was when they gave the order to attack. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. Thinking of this, Talia turned her head slightly and looked at the beautiful figure sitting on the right rear side. Miss Audrey, I'll have to trouble you next. To be honest, Although Audrey has a good diplomatic relationship with Plant, the current situation of this ship and our situation is a bit delicate. While rendezvous with the son of Dan's slave, more information was shared with Audrey Britannia, who was actually Lakis Klein. The time was behind. The time of the Minerva was far behind the time of Audrey. According to the time of the meeting with Rei Mingkai and the others and the Throne of Command, it had only been slightly more than a month since the Minerva's time. However, Audrey's time was already the second year since the outbreak of the X1 Rift crisis. Talia, who did not have any sense of reality, had to accept this fact even though she felt it was ridiculous. Captain Talia, leave the matter of communicating with Audrey to me. This is also the reason why I came with the ship. Lakis nodded slightly and agreed to Talia's request. However, if they wanted to communicate with Audrey, they would have to wait a while. Right now, the battle was far from over. In the center of the battlefield, the bloody storm was still wreaking havoc in the Beta. Behind the blood-red storm that had rolled up, in addition to the white and gold colors, there were also some red embellishments. The golden deviant sky Mina was leaning on her sword as she stood on top of a mountain of Beta's limbs. Inside, Mina stared coldly at the Beta army that was swarming in from all directions, not at all intimidated by the menacing Betas. All of a sudden, several speedy assault-class Betas rushed up the hill of wreckage ahead of the rest. The moment the heavy and quick footsteps stepped on the small mountain of wreckage, blood splattered everywhere. In the blink of an eye, these assault-class BETs that could trample the wreckage beneath their feet would inevitably crash into Jinyaduanshan Mina. However, just as they were about to smash Metal Strange Sky Na into smithereens, several flashes of light suddenly appeared and sliced these assault-class monsters into pieces like sharp swords. Wallalala, in the blink of an eye, the 10-meter-tall assault-class monsters that were stepping on rolling blood turned into minced meat all over the ground. It was extremely thrilling. If it weren't for the fact that Na had been on the battlefield for a long time, she would have been shocked by the terrifying scene before her, and not be as calm as she was now. I thought you had already passed these monsters and attacked the target, Knight. As Jinyaduanshan Mina's white greatsword was pulled out, another burst of blood splattered. No. It's not time yet. As Rei Minkai's voice came, a vague outline appeared on the left side of Jinyaduanshan Mina. At the same time, more flashes of light flashed around this vague outline, plunging headfirst into the Beta army that did not know what death was, setting off a storm of blood. However, this line of defense is about to collapse. Even with the addition of his combat power, Sahak, the situation of the Bright Knight line of defense could only be maintained on the verge of collapse. Soon, it will be over. The vague outline turned from nothingness to reality. In a breath's time, Lancelot King's sword appeared on the left side of Jinyaduanshan Mina. At the same time, the flashes of light that were wreaking havoc in the Beta army turned around one after another, and like a disciplined army, they formed a neat formation in front of Lancelot King's sword. Then, countless fluorescent lights burst out from these armed compound flying wings that were arranged in a neat formation. Buzz! Buzz! It was a radiation shield. But it was not a radiation shield. Because at this moment, it was not a defense, but an attack. Clang! The moment the sound of metal exploded, a beam of light with great momentum shot out from the front of the formation formed by the armed compound flying wings. At this moment the air was burning. The pool of blood flowing down from the wreckage immediately boiled, emitting a foul smell. But these changes could not change what was about to happen in the slightest. Amidst the deafening roar, the beam of light that shot out pierced through the Beta army in front of Lancelot King's sword in one breath, and then effortlessly moved slowly with Rei Minkai's fine control, sweeping through the Beta army from left to right. The Beta's body, composed of carbon-based materials, was burned by the terrifying high temperature, and as bursts of strange fragrance rose, they were turned into charcoal in an instant, and then dissipated with the wind under the impact of the high-temperature gas. It was a shocking scene. At this moment, Mina was moved. When she faced the assault attack just now, Mina was calm as usual, without the slightest fear. But at this moment she showed an incredulous look. Even if she had seen Lancelot King's sword rush in and out of the Beta army with ease by relying on his heaven-defying subspace shield, she would never have thought that Lancelot King's sword would have such an amazing trick up his sleeve. In a standalone state, he could launch an attack comparable to a battleship's cannon. No. Even an ordinary battleship's cannon would not be able to achieve such an amazing sweeping effect, right? Looking at the charred wreckage all over the ground, looking at the faintly visible heatwave, only then did Mina understand what Ray Minkai meant when he said that it would end soon. The vibrating sound of the beam of light hitting the air gradually subsided. The light shield array composed of many armed composite wings also disintegrated. Logically speaking, the armed composite wings, which consumed a lot of energy, should return to the main body for a new round of charging under the redundant plan of the automatic control program. However, Ray Minkai stopped the automatic control system's control and manually ordered the armed composite wings, which consumed a lot of energy but still retained the ability to cut at high speed, to disperse again and hunt down the fish that escaped the net. Master Sahaka, are you interested in accompanying me on a trip? Have you found the target? Yes, just now. My allies have found the entrance to the bug's lair. Slightly messy vibrations came from the ground. It was not difficult to see from these vibrations that there was a large number of beta rushing to the surface from the depths of the cave. Be careful, Sosuke. These bugs seem to be very sensitive to electronic signals. On the other side of the cave, two M9X with the ECS system deployed were hidden in an undetectable corner. The only worry was that the beta's sensitivity to electronic signals would likely expose the whereabouts of the two M9X. Fortunately, the BTA that rushed to the surface from the depths of the ground did not seem to notice the two M9X. Instead, they rushed out of the cave in the billowing sand and dust and rushed toward the bright night line of defense. Yura's too safe. After carefully observing the situation on the left and right sides of the tunnel through a miniature probe, Sosuke Xiangliang sent out a safe signal. Understood. But wait. We still need to wait for reinforcement. Melissa Mao, who also used a miniature probe to observe the situation, stopped Sosuke Xiangliang, who was eager to try. Understood. The next second, Sosuke Xiangliang raised his left hand and pressed a few buttons on the left dashboard. A hard tube extended from the left foot of the M9X and probed downward. When it was about to reach the ground, it quickly unfolded and opened up an arc-shaped net, making close contact with the ground. Beep beep. Sosuke Xiangliang's eyes lit up. Yura's too. There's a situation. Another group of bugs rushed out. Looking at the feedback from the arc-shaped net, which was actually a vibration detector device, Sosuke Xiangliang immediately realized something. They seemed to have been discovered. Let's go. Melissa Mao did not waste any time, nor did she hesitate. She decisively issued the order to retreat. That's right. It was not that the beta did not notice the two M9XS, but they acted as if they could not see them and bolted out of the cave. Then, it was the emergency situation where Melissa and Sosuke Xiangliang were about to be attacked from the front and back. TSK. Someone is controlling these damn bugs. One in front and one behind, the M9X, who covered each other's retreat, activated the delayed fuse on the grenades at their waists and alternately threw them to more hidden corners. They were ready to give a big gift to the beta that rushed out of the cave. In the rapid and loud footsteps of the M9X, Melissa was the first to see the light in front of her. Sosuke. Roger. At the same time, the two M9X threw all the grenades in their hands into the dark cave behind them. They also took out the smoke grenades in unison, ignited them, and threw them toward the light in front of them. 5. Melissa shouted. Her M9X was one step behind. Sosuke Xiangliang's M9X rushed to the front, and he was already holding the assault rifle in his hand. 4. There was a flash of light in the darkness behind them. Boom! The grenade exploded. The shockwave generated by the explosion of the grenade rushed along the long and narrow passage, chasing after the two M9X. As soon as the sound ended, another one sounded. In the roar of the explosion, the beta's roar was getting closer and closer. 3. The shockwave caught up with Melissa's M9X, bringing with it a bit of bright red and billowing smoke. 2. Sosuke Xiangliang was calm and was not affected by the explosion behind him. In front of him was the boundary between darkness and light. 1. As soon as Melissa's voice sounded, Sosuke Xiangliang's M9X rolled forward. 2 faintly visible beams of light brushed past the back of the M9X, tearing open the darkness of the passage and blowing the ceiling into pieces. Tut tut tut! In the next second, gunshots rang out, and flowers of blood bloomed wantonly. It was the M9X piloted by Sosuke Xiangliang who raised his gun and shot the light level that was lying in ambush around the cave entrance one by one. Chapter 858. The smoke from the muzzle of the gun had yet to dissipate, and in front of them was a large area of land dyed red by the bright red liquid. Looking at the broken limbs floating in the bright red liquid, Xiangliang Soji took a few deep breaths and calmed his nervous emotions. Just now, they were already on the brink of death. When they sensed the intention of the beta to attack them from the front and back in time, they did not hesitate to risk being ambushed by the light-level beta outside. The choice to rush out of the cave was the right one. However, it was another game with death. 2. Gunshots and the roars of monsters came from behind. Soji, quick! Occupy the advantageous terrain. The monsters inside are about to rush out. Melissa Mao's voice was a little urgent. It made sense. If they only relied on the few dozen grenades equipped with the 2 M9XS, they could only stop the large-scale beta from rushing out of the cave. No. Yura's too. Now, what we have to do is to get out of the way. However, Xiangliang Soji's response made Melissa Mao a little confused. Even so, based on the tacit understanding accumulated over the years, Melissa Mao still drove her M9X to the right and rolled on the ground. In the flying dust, Melissa Mao saw an unfamiliar pure white body with unfolded light wings. It was pointing at the hole where the beta was constantly rushing out. Time seemed to have become unusually slow at this moment. In that slow time, Melissa Mao saw a large number of miniature aircraft flying out from behind the pure white body, hovering, and then gathering in front of it, forming an array of unknown meaning. The moment her doubts arose, they were eliminated. The surging air, the blazing high temperature, and the strong light that made it almost impossible to see, became Melissa Mao's feelings at this moment. When the rumbling roar gradually disappeared from the external sound capture system, Melissa saw the true face behind the dazzling and terrifying light. The burning and melting ground, the charred limbs, the originally slow-flowing bright red liquid was nowhere to be seen. It must have evaporated under the blazing high temperature. She looked back along the scorched traces. The hole that should have been constantly gushing out of the beta had become a hell, surrounded by high temperature and dripping magma. Yura's too. Are you okay? At the same time that Sosuke Sagamihara drove his M9X closer to Melissa Mao, he also looked at the pure white body that had suddenly appeared. No. I'm fine. Melissa shook her head and then controlled the mech to raise its hands. She signaled to the pure white mech that she had no ill intentions and also expressed her gratitude. However, she never expected that the pure white mech was not a stranger as Melissa thought, but an old acquaintance. Long time no see. Yura's to Yura 7. The voice that came from the encrypted communication channel used by the son of Dan's slave stunned the two of them, and they blurted out almost at the same time. Night. Melissa sucked in a breath of cold air when she realized the identity of the unfamiliar body. He couldn't help but recall the shocking scene from just now. Even the previous mithril, or even the opposing amalgam, probably didn't have such an exaggerated body, right? With a raise of his hand, he completely changed the battle situation of a local battlefield, and even reached the terrifying point of fighting against a small and medium-sized army in a single state. The pure white mech was the Lancelot Sword of Kings driven by Rei Minkai. After receiving the information from Melissa and Sosuke Sagamihara, Rei Minkai defeated the Beta army that attacked the front of the Bright Knight defense line as quickly as possible and rushed to meet with them as soon as possible. It seems that the scene just now scared you guys. I'm really sorry. No. I'm just a little surprised. That body doesn't look like an M9? It's not the Sword of Flames either, right? Sosuke Sagamihara's eyes kept wandering around the pure white mech. No matter how he searched his mind for the AS knowledge he was familiar with, he couldn't find an AS image that matched it. This is not an M9, nor is it the Sword of Flames. Well, do you still remember the Lancelot? This mech can be considered its follow-up. Lancelot Sword of Kings, surrounded by armed composite wings, spread out its light wings and slowly landed in front of the two M9XS. Is this the hole that Teresa speculated? Rei Minkai looked at the hole that had cooled down by more than half, but he could still see the obvious flow of magma. Yes. According to the data collected by the crustal monitoring device, there seems to be a huge underground space under this land. Melissa Mao sent the collected data to Rei Minkai while giving her own speculation. If the information on the Son of Dan slave is correct, even if this huge underground space is not where the leader is, I'm afraid it's where these monsters stockpile their troops. Is that so? Then, come with me. The armed composite wings that were hovering around moved together and flew into the hole that was still burning hot in an orderly manner in a formation of 3 wings. Immediately after, Lancelot's Sword of Kings retracted its light wings. The moment it landed on the ground, a set of high-speed pulleys were placed behind its legs and it rushed into the hole at a speed of 70 kilometers per hour. Melissa and Sosuke Xiangliang looked at each other as they looked at the back of the figure that was stirred up by the high-speed pulleys. They didn't say anything, but there was a tacit understanding. In the dark cave, the roars of the Beta echoed from time to time. However, they didn't see any Beta rushing out of the cave and pouncing on the intruders. This led them to take the lead in entering the hidden underground. It was very different from the hive that Rei Minkai was familiar with. According to the usual impression and settings of the Beta, in addition to producing Beta and collecting resources, the hive was more like a resource launch pad. After collecting enough G-elements, the hive would activate the relevant mechanism, pack the G-elements, and launch them into deep space. Therefore, the structure of the hive would be more like a launch pad. But right now, the hive hidden underground did not have a launching-related structure. It feels like the structure has been deliberately modified. Through the feedback of the armed composite wings that flew around to collect terrain information, according to the usual practice, the assistant White Cat State 0 quickly presented a roughly speculated model of the underground space in front of Rei Minkai. I'm afraid it's their work. Destiny Council? After Rei Minkai glanced at the model of the underground space, an answer emerged in his mind. An answer that could be confirmed immediately, even if it was just speculation. I'm afraid so. White Cat State 0 waved its paws and curled its lips. Other than them, I can't think of anyone else. Suddenly, the White Cat State 0's eyes changed. There's a situation. Rei Minkai's eyes changed, and several flashing red interfaces suddenly popped up, occupying a small half of the screen. It was a group of armed composite wings that investigated a tunnel. Enemies? No. White Cat State 0 slowly put down its paws, and its expression seemed to be somewhat unbearable. That's a little, words rolled in White Cat State Zero's throat a few times, but in the end it did not say anything. And Melissa Mao, who was following behind, seemed to have noticed something strange. Knight, did you discover something? Ray Minkai was silent for a moment and finally nodded. Sort of. Melissa Mao and Xiangliang Sosuke looked at each other through the screen. Both of them were confused. Logically speaking, if it was just discovering an enemy, Ray Minkai's reaction would not be so strange. Beta still did not appear. The eerie silence still lingered in the surroundings. Until Melissa Mao and Xiangliang Sosuke, who followed Lancelot King's sword all the way to a large space that seemed to be at least 1,000 square meters, Melissa Mao's expression froze. Xiangliang Sosuke's expression, which had always been calm, changed. A sigh sounded from Ray Minkai's throat. So this was the meaning of White Cat State Zero. That strange, translucent sarcoma, the blood vessels that were agitated and sometimes shriveled, behind the translucent flesh membrane, there were faintly discernible figures. Made Ray Minkai finally remember a certain cruel setting about Beta. Knight. This is. Melissa Mao bit her lip. This female soldier, who had been through many battlefields, could not help but be deeply shocked when faced with such a horrifying scene. Tools, cores, and so on. They were such an existence, wantonly transformed into this ghostly, inhuman appearance by Beta. Ray Minkai's eyes showed a trace of unbearable. Knowing was one thing, witnessing it with one's own eyes was another. But they are humans! Melissa Mao's voice was trembling. In the sarcoma closer to Melissa, more complete figures could be seen. But the further behind the sarcoma, the more horrifying it was. The figures in those sarcomas were no longer complete, or missing limbs or lost. Only a brain was left. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The subtle roar became louder and louder. It was the sound of Ray Minkai recalling the nearby armed compound wings. But now they are not. After a pause, Ray Minkai looked at White Cat State Zero. Give them relief. As White Cat State Zero nodded, the recalled armed compound wings locked onto the target and shot out a burst of light torrential rain. Boom! 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 The light beam pierced through the sarcoma and scattered the destructive flames in this underground space, wantonly burning the figures in the sarcoma. The imagined screams did not happen. Most of their senses have been cut off. What's left is probably only the brain that is still alive. Melissa Mao was silent. Xiangliang Zongjie was silent. What kind of existence was the Beta? The two of them finally saw through the scene in front of them that was different from the intelligence. Beta was an enemy, could only be an enemy that would not rest until death. At this moment, in the hearts of the two, this thought became more and more intense. And in front of Ray Minkai, a shadow quietly appeared. Kill me! Chapter 859. The shadow was faintly discernible. The words that came out made people feel a trace of madness, a trace of resentment, and a trace of pleading. Ghost? The tail of the White Cat Zero seemed to have bristled. Scared. Ray Minkai glanced at the White Cat Zero. How is this possible? The White Cat Zero grinned, revealing two sharp canine teeth. There are no ghosts in this world. The White Cat Zero muttered a few words, and its gaze fell on the sarcoma that had been burned by the sea of fire. Maybe it's a trap. But we have no other choice. Isn't it? No matter how we go, our goal is the lowest level. Ray Minkai was unmoved. The goal was very clear from the beginning. Night. It's getting late. In the flickering light, Melissa Mao's expression was not very good. Let's go. With one in front and two behind, the three bodies stepped into the burning sea of fire one after another, and stepped into the tunnel that led to the lowest level. A deathly pale light lingered in the vast space at the lowest level. The light that was like flowing liquid made this underground space have a trace of strangeness and a chilling atmosphere. However, The figure standing in the middle of this space turned a blind eye to this. They're here. Sure enough, as long as there is a small flaw, these little mice will consciously run over. Ha 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 ha. It's really delightful. The creepy laughter echoed in this underground space again and again. But this is a little overkill for you, the respected War Empress. Ha 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 ha. Dong, dong, dong. The slowly rotating meatball made a series of muffled sounds. It seemed to be refuting. But it also seemed to be agreeing. It seemed a little contradictory. What a pity. Now I really want to see your expression with my own eyes. But it can't be done. This is a very regrettable thing. However, it was also something worth remembering. It is precisely because of this that your war can be perfectly presented before my eyes. Mr. A stared at the slowly rotating meatball. Through the gaps of the meatball, he saw the brain that was wrapped in life support solution and connected by many artificial nerve. It was called the brain of Elizabeth Amirs, the War Queen. Boom. An ear-piercing boom rang out, and the entire underground space boiled over. Waves of violent tremors surged out from the depths of this underground space like a tsunami. In fact, in the areas where the tremors were the most intense, one could even hear the roar of thunder. Beta. It was the beta of an all-out attack. A huge net that had been woven for a long time was finally opened at this moment. He faced Rei Minkai and the other two. He pounced in the direction of Kagaya, who was glad that the beta had retreated once again. This was bound to be the fiercest attack of the beta army. Rumble. Unsettling and terrifying rumbles reverberated in the dark tunnel. The accompanying vibration caused the airborne radar to emit an ear-piercing alarm that resounded throughout the cockpit. Quick! Hide behind me! In front of him, he could vaguely see countless shadows swaying in the tunnel. After Rei Minkai, who had no time to explain anything, issued the alarm loudly, he decisively activated the subspace barrier of Lancelot E. King's sword. The light disappeared from the cockpit in an instant, and the moment it lit up again, the originally dark tunnel in front of him was already an astonishing scene of countless large and small betas rushing towards them. There was no doubt, no matter what kind of body it was, if it jumped into this narrow tunnel and was met by these countless betas rushing towards the ground, it would be a terrifying scene with a slim chance of survival. Amidst the rumbling running roar, it was the terrifying movement created by the orderly arranged assault-level betas as the vanguard. Listening to the rumbling running roar, looking at the large and small betas rushing past them, Melissa Mao and Sagara Sosuke did not have an easy time. Their instincts of fear of death made the two of them firmly control their bodies behind Lancelot the King's sword. What made the two of them puzzled was that Lancelot the King's sword in front of them did not make any counterattacks as they had imagined. Instead, he stood in place in dead silence, motionless, as if he had accepted his fate and faced this terrifying beta army head-on. But here was the strange thing. Even though Lancelot the King's sword stood straight in place, the terrifying beta army could not shake Lancelot the King's sword in the slightest. They could not even make Lancelot the King's sword take half a step back. What the hell is going on? The moment this doubt arose, the sharp Sagara Sosuke's eyes moved and he actually captured a strange scene. An assault-level beta that suddenly rushed past Lancelot King's blade had half of its body sliced off for no reason. It rolled to the ground in a splattering of blood until it hit the right foot of Sagara Sosuke's M9X. Only then did it come to a stop. This is a subspace barrier. It can swallow light and matter. Don't get too close to Lancelot. While Sagara Sosuke was still puzzled by the strange death of the beta that rolled to the feet of the M9X, Rei Minkai's explanation also sounded. With the strange characteristics of the subspace barrier, Rei Minkai was completely unafraid of this wave of beta army that rushed out from the deepest part of the ground. One had to know that for Lancelot the King's sword, who had relied on the subspace barrier to directly face the light-class battleship in the previous space war, this was just a small scene. It just took some time. That's right. Compared to the bright night defense line, it might only take some time here. Presumably, the mastermind behind the beta must have used his last resort. In the sky, thunder rumbled, and the dark clouds once again covered this part of the world. Underground, the monster army rushed out and rushed towards the bright night defense line. Between the two, there was the torrential rain that blocked the line of sight, suppressed the billowing sand and dust raised by the monster army's attack, and wantonly washed the ugly bodies of the monsters. Under the curtain of rain that was sometimes dim and sometimes illuminated by lightning, the pairs of scarlet eyes rose and fell like waves, one after another, sweeping towards the bright night defense line. Woo 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 woo! The ear-piercing alarm tore through the dim curtain of rain, and it also tore apart the rationality of the humans who had yet to recover from the previous tragic battle. Enemy attack! The hoarse roar aroused the human soldiers who had just laid down, guiding the extremely tired soldiers to pick up their weapons again, board their tanks, and board their MS, waiting for the last moment to arrive. The moment the ear-piercing alarm rang throughout the entire defense line, searchlights lit up one after another, sweeping across the waves that flickered with blood-red light, revealing the evil and ugly bodies in front of the human soldiers. Attack! Attack freely! There was no unified order, but as long as the frontline commanders who had survived the previous battle, they would roar in unison to attack. In an instant, gunshots rang out, artillery roared, and beams of light broke through the curtain of rain, piercing through the assault-level beta that had rushed up to the defense line. Boom! The sound of gunshots and artillery explosions could be heard on the defense line. Missiles that fell from the sky and tore apart the black clouds with countless thunderbolts were either blown up in the air by the light level behind the beta army, blasting a hole in the surrounding black clouds, or riding on the billowing smoke and crashing into the path of the beta army, blowing the surrounding monsters into pieces. The first area has been invaded by a mixed regiment of assault level and interception level. There have been a large number of casualties. Requesting support. The first line of defense in the second area has fallen. We have lost contact with the 3rd Armored Division. Requesting support. Emergency requests for help continued to gather in the command center behind the bright night defense line. Many liaisons racked their brains, trying to find troops that could support the front line in the last line of defense against Aubrey. The troops that had retreated to the rear to rest in the previous battle were ordered to attack again. Even if these soldiers were still tied with blood-soaked bandages, the armored vehicles still had half-cracked hatch doors that could not be closed, that had not been repaired, and the MS that was in tatters and did not have any time to change its armor were in the same situation. Everyone knew that this would be the last battle between Aubrey and the monster known as Beta. The monster that had devoured most of Aubrey's territory had come out in full force. At this moment, the only thing the soldiers of Aubrey, who had been fighting to this day, could do was to defend this last homeland with their lives. In the chaotic and orderly command center, Carrie, who had not changed out of her pilot uniform, gritted her teeth and stood there with a gloomy expression. She was struggling. As a leader, she should stand in the command center and command this battle. However, Carrie Yura Asho would never stand in the command center and wait for the end of the battle. Instead, as a warrior, she would lead her subordinates who loved and supported her to fight at the forefront and hold the final victory in her hands. But now, are you discouraged? Kukli Yura Ashar. The moment the familiar voice rang out, Carrie's eyes lit up and she turned around to look at the person standing at the door. However, before Carrie could open her mouth, the person who had just arrived stopped her from speaking. Tion Mina will never lend it to you. Kukli Yura Ashar. The woman standing at the door looked around and nodded to the soldiers of Aubrey, who saluted her before looking at Carrie again. Are you unwilling to stand here and watch the soldiers of Aubrey fight? Or are you still not used to your current identity and are still attached to that bloody battlefield? The woman named Lundmina Sahak took a step forward and walked towards Carrie with an intimidating aura. Carrie calmly looked at the woman who had always been prejudiced against her. She knew that even if she took over her father's responsibility and became Aubrey's prime minister, it would still be the same. Since she was young, the siblings of the Sahak family had never looked her in the eye. No. In this time of crisis, as Aubrey's prime minister and the current head of House Asha, I should be fighting with my subordinates on the front lines, not standing here and issuing orders to my subordinates. She stared into Mina's eyes and enunciated each word clearly. Not sending my subordinates to their deaths. Seeing the determination in Carrie's eyes that bordered on stubbornness, Mina suddenly burst out laughing. Ha 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 ha. Interesting. Looks like House Silent has indeed fallen hard. Oh well. It's about time. Mina looked at Director Simmons, who was standing at the side and keeping silent. Simmons, that thing is still with you, right? Simmons was taken aback. He glanced at Carrie and slowly nodded. Good. It's time to return it to its rightful owner. Mina took a few steps forward and patted Carrie's shoulder. Go and welcome your dawn. Chapter 860. The battle had reached its climax. After Mina took over the Bright Night defense line, Carrie followed Director Simmons to an underground tunnel that did not exist in the blueprint. Carrie, who was at a loss about the current situation, silently followed Director Simmons into the depths of the underground tunnel. This should have been Chisaka's mission. The rumbling caused by the white-hot battle outside had already affected the underground tunnel. With every step Carrie took, she could still clearly feel the aftershocks of the battle. However, her attention was not on this, but on Simmons. No, it should be the huge metal door behind Simmons. Seeing Carrie's gaze fall on the metal door, Simmons sighed faintly. This should have been Chisaka's mission. Father, is he still alive? What Simmons did not expect was for Carly to say such a thing when she opened her mouth. When she spoke, her eyes moved away from the metal door and met Simmons' gaze. Her gaze was filled with a light that did not allow Simmons to deceive or even lie. Simmons smiled faintly and did not fear her. Instead, he took a step back and raised his hand to wipe off the dust on the control panel that was mostly covered by his figure. The answer is right here. Lady Carrie. The answer, Carrie was unmoved. She continued to stare at Simmons, as if trying to find any flaw in his expression. The scene of Chisaka's sacrifice was still clearly imprinted in Carrie's mind. Especially when she saw Chisaka using his own blood to leave a blurry letter in the cockpit before his death. However, Carrie could understand the meaning of the letter. Carrie, the girl who took over Aubrey's authority through blood and fire, realized that in the war that almost destroyed Aubrey, some people did not die for their country, as she saw with her own eyes. Lord Mimi is watching. Mimi, my father is watching all of this, right? Carrie took a few steps forward and looked at Simmons as she asked. Simmons remained silent and gestured for Carrie to look at the console. Unable to find any answers from Simmons' face, Carrie frowned and looked down at the console. A line of words was clearly printed on the operating table that had most of the dust wiped off. As if this door will never open. Carly repeated the words to herself. Suddenly, Carrie smiled. I see. Carrie looked at Simmons again. Now, it's time to open this door, right? Simmons nodded. Yes. This was the seal left behind by Abu, Lord Me, before the last great battle. When Ab, who had been rebuilt from the ruins of war, was once again burned by the flames of war, it would be the time for the seal to open. Lady Carrie. Simmons raised his hand and gestured to Carrie to press the conspicuous button on the right side of the console. This must be the switch to open the door. Carrie was silent. But soon, she reached out and pressed the button. In the process of the door opening, amidst the rumbling sounds, her voice could be heard clearly. Chisaka knows about all of this, right? Simmons paused for a moment and nodded silently. Chisaka, I'm your guardian, and I'm the guardian recognized by Lord Naomi. But he can no longer wait for this moment. Originally, he should be the one to tell me all of this and lead me here. Am I right? The huge iron door opened, but Carrie did not take the first step. Yes. So, I am the one to complete this mission. Lady Carrie. Last question. Simmons nodded and waited for Carrie's question. Lund Mina Sahak. She knows about all of this? Simmons' mouth twitched in response to Carrie's question, seemingly hesitant. But soon, he gave an answer. Yes. Lord Mina knew about all of this from the start, and also knew about the existence of this seal. In fact, when Ob was being rebuilt, Lord Mina insisted on transferring this seal from the Dawnlight Society to Hui. What Simmons had expected didn't happen. Carrie was not shocked, nor did she become angry. She only nodded calmly. Then, let's break this seal. Carrie took a step forward and stepped through the open door. Simmons took a few steps to the right and said slowly, Lady Carrie, it may be a little dazzling. Please be prepared. Then, Simmons turned on the power switch. At that moment, the light was so dazzling that Carrie could not help but raise her hand to block her eyes, instinctively avoiding the light. At that moment, a voice sounded. Lord me. The seal has been opened. Far above the 9 heavens. In the huge satellite fortress that was entrenched in the void. A man with a respectful expression was standing in front of a floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the blue planet below and reporting the news from Earth. Is that so? I understand. The man waved his hand and let his subordinate leave, then said as if talking to himself. In the end, it was opened. Me. This is the inevitable result. The moment a stream of light was left in the air, a woman with a dreamy figure quietly appeared. Kay once said that no matter how young the lion's child is, one day, it will grow into a fierce lion that rules over a region. The man was silent for a moment, then smiled bitterly. This sounds a little strange. Then, the man sighed. What's the situation in Ob now? Most of the country has fallen, only the Huey defense line is still resisting. But this is only temporary. The Minerva has already met up with our battleship. A holographic projection screen was constantly displayed in front of the man. It was actually playing the battle that happened on the Huey defense line. When he saw the familiar armored vehicles and the MS independently developed and manufactured by Ob being drowned by the almost endless Beta army, the man's heart could not help but tighten. The illusory beautiful figure looked at the man's clenched, loosened and clenched fists. She looked at the man who wanted to say something but stopped. In the end, he forced himself to give up some unnecessary thoughts. Everything, I'll leave it to you. The man's gaze fell on the blue planet again. A dead man is still a dead man after all. After listening to the voice message left by me, Carrie's eyes were wet. But in the end, she still controlled it. The blood letter left by Chisaka before he died. Simmons' attitude of hiding something, and the existence of Lund Mina Sahak. It made Carrie feel a sense of urgency to know the truth behind Ob. Director Simmons, what is its name? Carrie had already changed into her pilot uniform and stood under the golden mech that was surrounded by countless lights. Dawn. Dawn Gouda. This is a new type of body developed by the Dawn Society after gathering all the data available and integrating all kinds of cutting-edge technology owned by the Dawn Society. Simmons handed the helmet to Carrie. Now, it belongs to you, Lady Carrie. Dawn Gouda. The hatch closed. Carrie, who was sitting in the cockpit, felt a surge of emotions, but she didn't show a trace of excitement. At this moment, it was the moment when Dawn Gouda, who had been sealed for a long time, appeared. It was also the moment when Carrie took a new step toward the answer in her heart. As the various wires connected to Dawn Gouda fell off, Dawn Gouda's system also reached the moment when all the systems were successfully activated. It was time to attack. Beep beep. At this time, a communication from the command center came in. It was Mina. Carrie, it seems that Dawn has been activated by you. Attack. The answer you want to know will be known after the war. But the prerequisite is that you must lead Aubrey out of this war, and you must survive. Mina's expression was as cold as ever, but Carrie could sense a hint of acknowledgement hidden beneath that cold expression. So, Carrie Yura Ashar, Dawn Gouda, attack. She had already said what she wanted to say. She couldn't get an answer to what she wanted to ask for now. Then, let all these questions be answered after this war to protect Aubrey. The moment the golden radiance soared into the sky from behind the bright night defense line, the sons of Dan's slave who controlled the sky immediately caught sight of its figure. That's what a dazzling existence! Isn't this little girl afraid of being targeted? As Cruz complained, the M9X lying on the deck of the Sons of Dan's slave quickly moved its muzzle and blew up a heavy light level that was targeting the golden radiance. Yura's 6 cover that golden body. That's the body piloted by Aubrey's Prime Minister. Next, the Sons of Dan's slave's mission is to help Aubrey reorganize the defense line. At the same time, Teresa's order also reached Cruz's ears. Understood. Then, I'll be a nanny. Just as Teresa said, the moment Dawn Gouda rushed into the sky, whether it was Aubrey's defenders or the Beta army that had already reached the last line of defense, they all noticed Dawn Gouda's figure. The attack from the Beta army followed, but it was blocked by the Sons of Dan's slave who were prepared. Whether it was Cruz's M9X targeting the light level and heavy light level, or the Sons of Dan's slave's excellent defensive radiation shield, they all became Dawn Gouda's shield at this moment. Prime Minister, please reorganize the defense line immediately. Our people have broken into the enemy's core area. Please hold on. Is it K? When the Golden Dawn flew past the Son of Dan's slave, it left Carrie with a question. Yes, K, we have found the enemy's leader. Then, I understand. Let's end it all. Soldiers of Aubrey, listen to my orders. Please follow me, follow behind this Golden Dawn, and end this war burning on Aubrey's land. Chapter 861. Overlooking the entire battlefield from a high altitude, it was a tragic scene of intersecting fangs. However, in this scene of intersecting fangs, a golden light was like a lighthouse in the storm. It tried its best to emit its own light to guide the Aub armor caught in the frenzy of the Beta army. The MS troops gathered and formed a powerful arrowhead, sweeping away any Beta troops on the battlefield that might break through the crumbling human defense line. It seems that the Aub side has stabilized. The radiation shield around the Son of Dan's slave exploded into dazzling balls of light one after another. The intense energy collision made the battleship, which was suspended in the sky above Kagaya and also acted as the shield of the Minerva, begin to shake a little. However, the shaking did not frighten Teresa. It was just the aftermath of the battle. It would not cause any harm to the masterpiece she was proud of. Master Mina, Captain Talia, now is the time. Teresa raised her hand slightly and pointed at the intersecting fangs on the screen. The enemy has invested all their forces in this battle. Now is the time. Looking at the densely packed monster army that dyed the entire battle line in a dazzling red, Mina's side was fine. On the other hand, Talia was frowning. Captain Teresa, how much longer will it take for night? Teresa's battle plan had already reached Talia's hands after the Minerva had landed. However, in their first joint battle, they had to face such a disparity in strength between the enemy and themselves. This made Talia feel a little unconfident. According to the time calculation, Knight should have fought the enemy leader by now. Captain Talia, look. Teresa raised her right hand and swiped in front of her. A specially marked tactical deduction appeared in the Minerva's communication system. Looking at the constantly flashing screen, Mei Ling subconsciously looked at Talia. Show it. Mei Ling, Talia nodded slightly. In such a situation where there was such a huge disparity in power, the calm Talia indeed needed some confidence. Yes, Captain. Now put it on the main screen. It was just a tactical deduction based on the data collected at the beginning of the battle. From this tactical deduction, it could be seen that there seemed to be a slight deviation in the Beta Army's precise and fierce momentum of cutting through the Kagaya defense line. Was it the influence of the Golden Mississippi Dawn? No, it was not. Talia was very clear about the ferocity of the Beta Army. Even if the Ob garrison received support from their own side, and the appearance of the Golden Mississippi Dawn boosted their morale, it could not change the situation of the disparity in strength. It could not change the fact that the enemy was a terrifying monster that was not afraid of life and death. The only explanation he could come up with was probably what Teresa had said. Night K, also known as Lei Mingkai, had successfully found the enemy's leader. Thousands of thoughts flitted across Talia's mind, until there was only one thought. She raised her head and looked at the screen. She looked at the profile pictures of the two women. Lady Mina, Captain Teresa, the Minerva will be responsible for assisting the left flank. Mina, who had already taken over the command of the Bright Night defense line, naturally agreed. Thank you very much. Then, I'll leave the frontline command of the left wing to Captain Talia. How about it? In addition to agreeing to Talia's request, Mina also generously handed over the frontline command of the left wing to Talia. This caused Talia to hesitate. Agree. Captain Talia. Next, I'm afraid Lady Mina will join the battlefield again. Teresa saw it clearly. Although she had found that the Beta Army's command system seemed to be a little chaotic, Ob still urgently needed any forces to join before the end of this battle. Yes, Captain Talia. This is not a request. It's an order, Mina said seriously. Talia understood. She smiled softly. If this is an order from the Human Alliance, then the Minerva and Talia Karates will obey. I'm counting on you, Captain Talia. The three women completed the next task in an instant and immediately took action. Talia, the Minerva, will be in charge of the left wing. Mina, on the other hand, will pilot the heretic Golden Secret Mina to the right wing to command. As for the son of Dan's slave, it was still floating steadily above the Bright Night defense line, attracting the attacks of many light level and heavy light level hidden in the Beta Army. Everything will be in a race against time. When the noisy corridor was once again wrapped in dead silence, it was a terrible scene of a mess. Xiangliang Sosuke subconsciously moved his feet, but under the sensing of the somatosensory control system, even the M9X moved his feet. In the subtle mechanical roar, a blood-colored ripple quickly spread out, and then refracted back and forth between the wreckage until it reached the depths of the corridor. Just now, how many monsters have passed by? Melissa Mao's hoarse voice came from the M9X next to him. Just now, she and Xiangliang Sosuke were relaxed, but at the same time, they were not relaxed. Since the beginning of the battle, the monsters that gave the two of them ferocious, cruel, and fearless of death had actually done such a frightening thing. In the face of Lancelot to Sword of the King, which was said to be a subspace barrier, they paid a huge price. Even the corpses that had covered the entire corridor were constantly trampled and crushed by the following assault level, interception level, and other large and small BETs. The terrifying scene of blood flowing like a river still rushed out crazily from the depths of the corridor and hit the subspace barrier of Lancelot as Sword of the King head-on. Melissa Mao, who had witnessed the whole process, was already pale. She subconsciously shifted her gaze upwards, not daring to look closely at the long river of blood flowing into the depths of the corridor under the M9X's feet. There are probably tens of thousands. No, it may be more than that. Rei Minkai's voice was much calmer. Compared to the two people hiding behind Lancelot as Sword of the King, Ray Minkai witnessed the whole process of the Beta army fearlessly crashing into the subspace barrier at close range. This group of lunatics. Beside Ray Minkai's hand, the White Cat State Zero was muttering curses at the Beta. Night. Time is running out. Xiangliang Sosuke's voice seemed to be trembling. Presumably, he was also suppressing his fear instincts. And, let's go. The moment the flames of the propulsion engine caused the long river of blood under their feet to boil, the three mechs rushed into the dark corridor and rushed to the deepest part of the hive. And there, the goal of Ray Minkai and the others, the leader who controlled countless BETs, was the mastermind behind the scenes. They're here. Mr. A slowly turned around and looked at the only corridor that could reach here. Your Highness, are you nervous? The little rats have already found this place. Dong. Dong. The dull sound was neither slow nor hurried, but it sounded like a perfunctory response to Mr. A did not care about this. Is that so? Then, let your Highness personally entertain these little rats. As the cold laughter slowly sounded, Mr. A's figure had already disappeared from this underground space, leaving only the slowly rotating sarcoma that emitted a pale light. After a while, several bright flames appeared in the roar of the engine. Hum. Hum. Without waiting for the figure in the flames to become clear, several beams of light descended from the sky and swept across the top of the exit of the corridor, but did not cause any effective damage. This was because when the beams of light descended, a barrier that seemed to be able to swallow everything in the world swallowed the beams of light that were a fatal blow to ordinary mechs. Boom. Boom. Without any communication, the moment the beams of light were swallowed, several black shadows flew out from the shadows of the corridor, swept across this underground space like lightning, and crashed into the sarcoma, causing a huge fireball to explode. Attention! Activate the Lambda drive system at any time. Taking advantage of the fireball blocking the line of sight, Lancelot King's sword, who was the vanguard, rushed out of the corridor in one breath. Behind him, under Ray Minkai's instructions, the two M9XS decisively activated the Lambda drive system. However, unlike the courageous Lancelot the King's sword, who moved forward bravely, Melissa Mao and Sagara Sosuke, who knew the limitations of the Lambda drive system, cautiously adopted a formation that covered each other and stepped into this underground space. Uras 7, cover night. The moment the Lambda drive system's light appeared, the M9X controlled by Melissa Mao raised the machine gun in its hand, aimed at the fireball that had mostly dissipated, and fired a series of bullets. The bullets that poured out, with the support of the Lambda drive system, broke through the limit of its own speed in one breath, and brutally tore through the fireball, and directly hit the sarcoma. Puff, puff. The sound of bullets tearing through flesh was heard. Even if she could not see the scene behind the sarcoma, Melissa Mao dared to determine that this disgusting sarcoma must be full of holes. Be careful. Uras 2. Suddenly, Sagara Sosuke's warning made Melissa Mao's heart tighten, and the Lambda drive system was instantly activated. Pa! The sharp sound of something breaking through the air followed. Then, the instant the two cold glints fell, Melissa Mao clearly saw two wriggling tentacles fall onto the screen before her. That thing won't be killed so easily. Be careful. Melissa Mao looked up, but found that Lancelot the King's sword was blocked by so many tentacles that it made her scalp numb. What kind of monster is this? Lancelot the King's sword waved his hands, bringing about a cold light. The cold light passed in a flash, cutting off all the tentacles that were blocking Lancelot the King's sword's advance. It's just some scary stuff. This junk, is it your ability? Brain level beta. In front of Ray Minkai's eyes, the shadow reappeared. Chapter 862. The shadow dissipated and the tentacles retreated. The crisis seemed to have ended. A stream of light flashed across the radiation vibration sword's blade. Lancelot the King's sword stood with his sword in hand, and the two M9XS occupied the advantageous positions on his left and right sides. Even though Rei Minkai did not give any orders, as veterans of the battlefield, Melissa Mao and Xiangliang Sosuke could see some clues from the sudden silence. Dong! Dong dong! Suddenly, a drum-like muffled sound rang out. The source of the sound was the slowly rotating sarcoma. That thing is like an egg? Melissa Mao moved her lips and uttered these words. Maybe it is. Rei Minkai vaguely felt a familiar atmosphere. This familiar atmosphere was simply absurd in the current situation. I feel like I've seen this situation before. Not to mention Rei Minkai, even the White Cat State Zero was muttering. 222. At this moment, gunshots rang out again. However, the whistling bullets did not penetrate the sarcoma like before. Instead, they were blocked by a monster that suddenly rushed out from the ground. In the rolling sand and dust, dozens of sparks splashed out from the square hard hammers made of unknown materials, firmly blocking the sudden attack. Hammer level? Rei Minkai's gaze passed through the rolling sand and dust and recognized the true body of the monster that rushed out from the ground at a glance. Yuras 7. Cease fire. Pay attention and observe. Melissa Mao stopped the source of the gunshots, the M9X driven by Xiangliang Sosuke. Yes. Xiangliang Sosuke responded, but his face was calm. The gunshots just now were not Xiangliang Sosuke's recklessness, but a test. Roar. The monster that waved the square hard hammers to block the attack became more and more irritable and uneasy, repeatedly growling. From the monster's performance, it was different from the beta that Rei Minkai was familiar with. Rather than saying that this monster had no self-consciousness, feelings, and only knew to obey the orders of its superiors, it was better to say that it was a beast that thirsted for slaughter. Boom! The muffled thud sounded again, as if it had infinite power. It instantly suppressed the monster that acted differently from the average beta. At the same time, the ghastly white light emitted by the tumor flickered. The ugly, rolling, overlapping wrinkles began to surge, as if something was about to break through the ugly tumor and descend upon this place. As the radiating vibration sword's radiance lit up, Lancelot the King's sword passed by the strange hammer-level monster. However, in the face of the invincible radiation vibration, the long sword had met a rare opponent. In front of Rei Minkai's eyes was the monitoring alarm from the radiation-vibrating longsword. The moment the hammer-class monster passed by, the radiating vibrating longsword that collided with it was damaged. Even the energy circuit was cut off. As the shattered square hammer fell, the radiant vibrating sword in Lancelot the King's sword's right hand also lost the support of its energy source. The bright red blade turned back into a pitch-black sword that had not been activated by the energy source. Clang! Lancelot the King's sword's right hand loosened, and the blade fell to the ground. The bright light followed closely and gathered on Lancelot the King's sword's right arm, forming a light shield with powerful defensive power. However, the hammer-level monster that should have taken advantage of the situation to pursue decisively retreated. Amidst the muffled footsteps, the hammer-level monster slowly retreated to the right side of the tumor. It was not prepared for Rei Minkai's possible attack at all. Boom! The muffled sound of a drum continued to sound. A pale radiance, the surging tumor, at this moment welcomed the moment of its arrival. Hiss! The terrifying sound of flesh being torn apart suddenly sounded. Suddenly, the slowly spinning tumor shattered. The pale radiance immediately became brighter, as if a dazzling sun had risen in this underground space. However, this sun was not an ancient existence that scattered its own radiance on the earth and warmed everything in the world as humans knew. Instead, it spread out an extremely cold radiance in this underground space. Even if there was an excellent ecological maintenance system in the cockpit, Rei Minkai and the other two could still feel the chill hidden in the white light. Vaguely, a shadow appeared in the white light, attracting the attention of Rei Minkai and the other two. sword blade, rifle, even the circling armed compound wings. They all locked onto that figure in unison. Welcome! Welcome to my domain, knight from another world. The white light gradually faded, and when the figure became clear, Lancelot the King's sword also received a message. I knew it! White Cat State Zero's eyes lit up and it exclaimed. There was no other reason. It was because the shadow that appeared in the white light turned out to be a humanoid face, and a body made of many muscle tissues. The figure was graceful, but unusually ferocious. Human? Giant? Melissa Mao's exclamation came. No, that's not a human. Xiangliang Sosuke's voice was full of caution. Look at that body, is that the body that a human should have? This is a monster the size of a M9X. The white light did not completely dissipate. The last trace of its remaining radiance gathered and formed a staircase, paving a path for the graceful but unusually ferocious figure. A path that came to Lancelot the King's sword. As the figure stepped down, the hammer level with different behavior actually stepped forward again, as if it had met its master. It docilely lowered its head, waiting for its master to pet it. Seeing this, Ray Minkai frowned slightly. This had exceeded the beta that Ray Minkai knew. Knight from another world. Your courage is worthy of praise. However, this is already the end of your road. The figure raised his hand and gently stroked the hammer level. And this is not up to you to decide. The high-speed pulley block under Lancelot the King's sword's feet was activated. When the white lightning reappeared, several red lights had already streaked across the sky and struck the figure's head. Roar! The sudden crisis made the hammer level that had become docile become irritable again, but it was easily suppressed by the figure. Clang! The sharp sound of swords clashing exploded. In front of the radiant vibrating longsword, the figure pulled out a sword blade from somewhere and firmly blocked the attack from Lancelot the King's sword. Not bad. There was no fluctuation on the humanoid's face, and there was not even the movement of moving his lips to speak. But her voice really reached Ray Minkai's ears. The attack did not succeed, and Lancelot the King's sword quickly retreated. The sword light slashed through Lancelot the King's sword's afterimage that retreated quickly, but there was no killing intent to attack Lancelot the King's sword. It was more like an ordinary salute. Buzz. The buzzing sound of the sword blade's vibration was extremely crisp, causing Melissa Mao and Sosuke Xiangliang, who subconsciously covered Ray Minkai, to reveal a surprised expression. The enemy did not attack Lancelot the King's sword. Instead, he raised the sword with both hands and made a salute similar to the knight's salute that was popular in Europe during the Middle Ages on Earth. Knight from another world. The end is here. Survival? Or destruction? It's all under the sword. The hammer level retreated again, leaving only the graceful and ferocious figure with the sword raised high. Knight's duel? Beta, is this also popular? You have no choice. Rumble. Suddenly, the earth shook. Interceptors and hammers swarmed over from all directions, sealing off all paths of retreat. At this moment, Ray Minkai, Melissa Mao, and Sosuke Xiangliang had no way out. Yuras, too, you guys take a step back. Pay attention to the power of the Lambda drive system and the light level that may appear. Understood. Thus, the two M9XS stood back to back. Under the watchful eyes of the interceptor and hammer level, they retreated to the corner closest to the tunnel. Buzz. The radiation vibrating longsword cut through the air. Lancelot the King's sword raised high and returned the salute to the figure. It seems that I have no choice. Indeed. On the line of defense where you have high hopes, I have deployed no less than 100,000 troops. No matter what choice you make, the beta on the line of defense will not be reduced because of this. The figure raised his right hand and waved. The beta that surrounded the surroundings retreated one after another, but they still controlled the exit of the tunnel in and out of this underground space. Elizabeth Amirs. Knight from another world, report your name. Ray Minkai was silent for a moment. Britannia Empire, Knight Ray Minkai. Buzz! The cold sword light drew an arc in the air and pointed at Lancelot the King's sword. Very good. This battle is a life and death duel. Struggle to your heart's content for the empire you protect. The declaration of war that claimed to be Elizabeth Amir's was interrupted by the armed composite wings circling around. Beams of light poured down, trying to pierce through that person. However, the other party's reaction was unusually fast, not giving Ray Minkai any chance to succeed. Moreover, the moment the beam of light fell, the sharp sword light had already appeared. Boom! Blazing sparks fell like rain. The beams of light shot out by the armed composite wings were actually blocked by that person's sword blade one by one. In the flickering flames, Ray Minkai finally saw that humanoid face clearly. Pale skin covered in blood vessels, tightly closed eyes, blood-colored lips, hair that was not burned even when it was hit by the sparks, and the muscles below the neck that were exposed to the air and not protected by the skin, looking exceptionally ferocious. This was the person who was forcing Ray Minkai to fight one-on-one with him, who claimed to be Elizabeth Amir's. An existence with a human outline but a terrifying creation. Clang! In the remnant light of the dissipating beam of light, a sharp killing intent suddenly descended. Chapter 863. The blades clashed and the figure was ghostly. Lancelot the King's sword waved the radiation-vibrating longsword in his hand and split the smoke in front of him, forcing out the figure hidden behind him. The sharp sound echoed in the space, but it did not bring any signs of hurting the enemy. Buzz! The trembling sound of the blade cutting through the air slowly sounded. The huge figure that was not inferior to Lancelot the King's sword slowly turned the blade in his hand. Otherworld Knight. Not bad. The humanoid face was neither sad nor happy, but its voice echoed directly in Ray Minkai's mind. Kai, be careful. The fur on the white cat State Zero's body almost all stood up. Yes. In a short exchange, the strength displayed by the opponent had far exceeded that of the enemies Ray Minkai had encountered so far. The strange body, the strange ability, all pointed to an inhuman fact. Buzz! The blade cut through the air. Ray Minkai's gaze changed, and Lancelot the King's sword instinctively raised his right hand and blocked with the radiation light shield on his arm. Bang! The moment the ear-piercing sound hit the ear, the blade in the huge figure's hand sank half into the radiation light shield, almost cutting off Lancelot the King's sword's right arm. This also meant that the enemy's strength was far above Lancelot the King's sword's. Clang! A red light from bottom to top pierced the heart of the huge figure. Bang! The opponent just turned his wrist and gave up the idea of completely breaking the radiation light shield, and blocked the blade of Lancelot the King's sword. However, the moment the blade was blocked, the huge figure quickly retreated and pulled away from Lancelot the King's sword. When the figure landed, the doubtful voice sounded in Ray Minkai's mind again. Interesting. In front of the humanoid face was a sword blade with a hole. Just now, this was the blade that almost broke through the radiation shield. However, under the counterattack of Lancelot's King's sword just now, a crack had appeared on the blade of the sword. What the hell is that? Overload mode only made a small dent. White Cat Zero's eyes widened. In the face of the radiation that could cut through any armor as easily as cutting vegetables, how could there be a day when the sword could not defeat the opponent's weapon? It was the same with that strange hammer-level monster. The enemy in front of him was the same. That's not surprising. State Zero. The world is so big. They were as numerous as the stars in the sky. In this vast world, there would always be weapons that could match or even surpass the radiation-vibrating longsword. This was not a world where a weapon with outstanding performance could be used as a tyrant. At this moment, the gigantic figure named Elizabeth Amir's raised her hand. The chilliness unique to the Grim Reaper's scythe descended. Under the crisis of life and death, Rei Minkai decisively activated Lancelot's King's Sword subspace barrier. Suddenly, thousands of rays of light covered the sky and the earth, drowning the figure of Lancelot's King's Sword. Knight! Melissa Mao and Sosuke Sagara, who were at the side, cried out in surprise. They immediately raised the machine guns in their hands and locked onto Elizabeth Amir's. Unexpectedly, before they could even open fire, the assault grade and interceptor grade monsters rushed toward the two of them, completely blocking off the two M9XS attack paths. This fearless action not only interrupted Melissa Mao and Sosuke Sagara's movements, but also forced them to face the surging tide of assault class and intercept class attacks. They could only rely on the Lambda Drive System's barrier to resist the assault class death charge. TSK. Sosuke, stabilize first. Don't be scattered by these monsters. Understood. The thousands of rays of light that poured down quietly dissipated. Lancelot's King's Sword figure appeared again. This made the two of them, who were forced to retreat by the assault-level monsters and could only rely on the Lambda Drive System's barrier to resist, could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. Don't worry about me. Yuras to Yura 7. Rei Minkai, who told Melissa Mao and Sosuke Xiangliang not to care about his situation, raised his eyes and looked at the top of Elizabeth Amir's head. Their densely packed tentacles were hanging down, twisting and stretching from time to time. At the end of these tentacles there were tissues that looked like eyeballs. This was the culprit that had shot out thousands of rays of light just now. Presumably, this was the organ tissue that had the same function as the big eyeball of the light level. This is the trump card that allowed you to survive the beta impact? The blade in her hand slowly lowered. Elizabeth Amirs raised her left hand and pointed at Lancelot King's sword. Thousands of rays of light descended once again, drowning Lancelot King's sword once again. This time, the momentum was even greater. The strength of the attack was also even more terrifying. As the underground space where the brain level was located, whether it was the walls or the ground, there would definitely be a layer of defense organization that could withstand the attack of large-caliber weapons. However, it was this kind of organization, which was enough to make the large-caliber weapons possessed by humans lose their attack effect, that melted the moment the thousands of rays of light fell. Bright red flames soared into the air. As the boiling solution flowed up, this underground space was immediately filled with a strange smell that was similar to burning flesh tissue. Looking at the fiery red solution that was rolling and flowing, Elizabeth Amirs did not have any joy of defeating the enemy. She only withdrew her hand and stopped the attack. The light dissipated again, and the figure of Lancelot King's sword appeared once again. It was still unscathed. It's quite an interesting armor. A knight from another world. Rei Minkai ignored him. He stepped on the ground and Lancelot King's sword launched its first attack. A black shadow rushed over and went straight for Elizabeth Amir's face. However, the other party turned her head slightly and dodged the attack. This was just a test? No. It wasn't. Rei Minkai's target from the beginning was not Elizabeth Amir's, but the densely packed, wriggling tentacles above her head. The black shadow that Elizabeth Amir's dodged snaked up and pounced on those tentacles. Then a gap appeared. The tentacles that were blocking the front of the black shadow fell off in batches. It looked as if they had taken the initiative to fall off from the main body. Pa! As the dull sound of the flesh tissue falling to the ground rang out, the tentacles under Elizabeth Amir's feet were already falling off in batches. Buzz! Immediately after, Lancelot King's sword pulled with his right hand, and the black shadow that was shuttling back and forth in the tentacles suddenly turned around, finally revealing its hidden fangs. Between the tentacles that fell like rain, the turning black shadow was like a venomous snake that had locked onto its prey. It pounced on Elizabeth Amir's back at lightning speed. However, The moment the black shadow was about to touch Elizabeth Amirs, the other party disappeared. All that was left was an afterimage that was penetrated by the black shadow and quietly dissipated. At the same time, Lancelot King's sword also disappeared from the spot like Elizabeth Amirs. When he reappeared, he was already at the place where Elizabeth Amirs was standing before. And in the original position, she was holding an unfamiliar blade that made Ray Minkai very uneasy. "There's something wrong with that sword." White Cat State Zero frowned and stared intently at the unfamiliar blade in Elizabeth Amir's hands. Obviously, when the two of them swapped positions, Elizabeth Amirs took the opportunity to replace the chipped blade. Whoosh! The sound of the iron chain swinging could be heard. It was Ray Minkai who decisively controlled Lancelot King's sword and commanded the Black Shadow to attack again, going straight for Elizabeth Amir's face. This time, it was not a bluff. Bang! In the blink of an eye, sparks burst forth. Ray Minkai and White Cat State Zero's expressions changed at the same time. The unfamiliar blade in Elizabeth Amir's hands actually stopped the Black Shadow in one fell swoop, forcing it to reveal its true face. That was one of the equipment that Lancelot King's sword had, hooklock. It was different from the hooklock that the Britannia Empire's body was equipped with. The hooklock that Lancelot King's sword was equipped with could be covered by the subspace barrier when it was activated. This allowed it to maintain its strange and powerful maneuverability while at the same time achieving astonishing lethality. However, the opponent's blade had successfully ignored the subspace barrier that covered the hooklock and slashed on the hooklock's body in one fell swoop. No, that's not ignoring it. It's canceling it out, neutralizing it. White Cat State Zero, who had been monitoring the state of Lancelot King's sword, exclaimed, "The blade in that guy's hand also has subspace technology?" Doubts could only be dispelled with action. As the blocked hooklock returned at lightning speed, Lancelot King's sword attacked again, waving the blade in his hand and slashing at Elizabeth Amirs. Boom! At this moment, a strong collision reaction of space energy suddenly erupted. The defensive structure under their feet suddenly broke, splashing out bursts of blood mist that had not completely spread out and was blown away. The terrifying shockwave swept through the entire underground space. The impact was so strong that it even blew away the assault level and intercept level that were besieging the two M9XS and pressed them firmly into the wall, unable to move. Boom! Boom! The roar of the energy collision was incessant, like thunder. Melissa Mao, who was able to break free, could not help but gasp. In just less than a few minutes, Ray Minkai and Lancelot King's sword had actually created such a terrifying scene. The cracks in the defensive structure under their feet continued to extend and tear. Under the devastation of the shockwave, countless fragments exploded and pierced into the bodies of the surrounding betas, causing blood to splatter everywhere. Fortunately, the Lambda drive system of the 2M9XS was still operating vigorously, allowing Melissa Mao and Sosuke Sagara to gain a moment of respite from this terrifying scene. However, the more terrifying movement was still to come. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.